In the darkness, it was said that humanity would not survive at this rate. The guy ran, monsters attacking and destroying people all around him. He didn't know how to fight them. He thought that creating a magic circle would help him. Hurrying, he created it and struck the huge monster with protective magic, forming a wall of water around him. He begged for his attacking magic to work, but no, the monster was approaching, and he cried out that it was too late. The game announced that he was dead, and the game ended. He stood there wearing virtual reality glasses, not understanding how it had happened. He cursed and said that watching more than 2 million people die was not long, and realized that this game was a VR history simulator, which was popular in those days. He sat there and said that he guessed students really liked the game. His dozing friend asked if he had played it, and he replied in the affirmative and said that the class might like this topic. It was 630 years ago, the game Deus Ex Machina. Magical beasts flooded the world and tormented people, so all magic spells and tools were banned. His classmate was excited, saying that he had only played it once, being unable to use magic, and asked if forbidden high-level magic was allowed when he played. He replied that an inexperienced guy like him would cause a magical explosion if he used such magic, which would be dangerous. He stood in the magic storage room, told his friend not to be angry, and created a magic circle. In their world, where offensive magic was not allowed, people were widely trained in magic in their daily lives, and, with their advanced system in the world they lived in, it was very convenient. He created a jar of iced coffee and gave it to his colleague. He was an ordinary guy named Minato. Suddenly, a 27-meter, 30-ton magic car crashed into the building. Traveling at a speed of 300 km/h, Waller, the magic car crashed into the building, destroying the floor on which he and his colleague were standing. His colleague shouted into the void, trying to find him. He never thought he would die this way. He saw no wounds on himself and wondered if he was alive, because he had definitely been crushed to death. Before losing consciousness, he heard someone calling his name, and it was likely that this person was still alive. He wanted to understand where he was. Judging by the terrain, he thought it might be a forest. He reasoned that since there were no specific wounds on his body, he must have ended up in a hospital. He wondered if this was the place everyone talked about and decided that it was. He decided to try to use magic to get a notebook and pen from the storage room, if he could do it. He was delighted to find an object that could draw out magic, a magical electronic terminal. Although it was a very old model, he could use it to call for help. Hoping that the device worked, he turned it on, and it worked. He asked where he was, and the device replied that it was the Minia forest. He was happy that the voice worked, but saddened that he did not know this place. He thought he had never heard of this place, but asked the device to show him a map. The device replied that there were unidentified places and asked if he wanted to see them. He answered in the affirmative. The terminal showed him unidentified areas, natural mountains and rivers, and ancient architecture. He said that it was completely different from his world. He decided that he had somehow been reincarnated in another world. Seeing a skull and crossbones sign, he wondered what it meant, saw magical animals, and was surprised by this. He wondered if all magical beasts had died out in his modern world, and he didn't know how to fight them. If he encountered a magical beast here, how could he save himself? The terminal said he could win if he used offensive magic, and he replied that he could expect that from a guy who lived in peaceful times. The terminal insisted that he had to fight. The terminal wanted to show him the details, so he ordered it to show him. When the terminal showed him, he was so amazed that they were magic circles containing offensive spells. He was shocked because it was the first time he had seen them. A normal person can only dream of seeing them. Attack spells carry a lot of information. He was delighted that with magical attack spells he could defeat beasts. He touched one spell to find out what it did, and the terminal said it was a spell of power. Suddenly, the terminal stopped working before finishing its sentence. He was annoyed that the terminal was broken. He lay there and thought that all he had left were magic spells for everyday life. Then he remembered how he had created a magic circle and a water ball. He still remembered some magic circles, and he thought he could restore them, even if it required some preparation. He wanted to restore them in the simplest way possible, and then he heard a cry for help. He turned around and was surprised to see that it was a person, and he had a bad feeling. The boy was riding a horse and calling for help. A huge, terrifying monster was approaching him. He thought that, unlike in a VR game, it had a real intention to kill. The boy was lying on the ground, and the monster was about to attack him. The guy thought about how to save him and whether he could save him. He didn't know how powerful the attacking spells he had seen were, but if he didn't do anything, the man would die. He decided there was no other way out and jumped onto the cart. He thought that even if he didn't succeed, at least he could distract the monster. He activated the magic circle. The target was identified, and the monster's reflection was in his eyes. He directed the attack. He activated the lightning spear. He shouted that the circle was huge, and that he couldn't hold it for long. He decided to abandon it. The force of the circle caused everything to smoke, raising a large cloud of dust, and the monster was stunned. The monster was spun around by a crazy force, and the blade hit the ground, cutting it into pieces. The monster was spinning and being killed by magic, and the man lay struck by the sight of it all. The monster died, lying on the chopped-up ground, with a light smoke rising from its carcass. He was amazed that he could kill the monster with magic. He realized that the power of offensive magic was incredible. The man the monster had been chasing cried, asking what kind of power it was. He realized that offensive magic was not very common in this world, and was glad that he was able to perform magic. The man rushed towards him, introducing himself as a merchant named Jit Li, and wanted to pay him for his help. He thought that this was a high-level adventurer and said that they could leave it for later. He introduced himself as Minato, and also thanked him for saving his life. The merchant couldn't understand how he could have saved him. Minato thought he couldn't say that he had been reincarnated. His terminal was broken, and asked him to show him the way. The merchant was surprised that there was a map in the strange box. Minato realized that he didn't know what a magical information terminal was. He had encountered it in this world and didn't understand that he didn't know. He didn't understand what was happening or what to do now. The merchant looked at him and realized that something was bothering him, asked him not to make such a face, and offered to take him to the nearest town, which he agreed to. Jit Li told Minato that his power was strong and that he should wait for the wild boar he had killed, and suggested that he go to the Adventurers Guild in the city. The merchant said that he didn't need to worry about money, and that now it was his turn to help him. He thanked him. Jit Li told him that he was very strong, but still got lost in the forest, wondering if he had trained there. The guy replied that if it weren't for him, he could have died, and he was repaying kindness with kindness. The merchant said that was an excellent explanation, and he understood everything and handed him an apple. As he was about to take it, he thought that he was a good guy. The merchant asked if everything was okay with him. He answered positively and thought that he knew little about the current world. Jit Li said that they should not delay, as new monsters would appear when it got dark, and they set off. He explained to him that they were heading towards Minia, a city where many new adventurers were gathering, and that it was a prosperous city, and he was sure the guy would like it. Minato ate an apple and asked if adventurers were people who traveled the world. Minato said the apple was delicious. White birds flew in the sky. There was a huge tower with the words 13 Deus Ex Machina written on it. He was amazed that the gears of fate had begun to turn. The cart shook so much that his rear end began to ache. He saw a small animal. He was surprised that he had never seen such animals in his world and thought that it was harmless. The little animals climbed a tree, and the merchant warned him that they were poisonous and not to touch them. The merchant determined where they needed to go using a map and showed him. Pointing to the city, he said it was the city of Minia. The merchant said that it was half a day's drive by cart to the nearest city, and he doubted that he had made such a journey alone. The guard at the gate welcomed him to Mania and asked if Jit Li was accompanying him. He thought that this world was different from his civilized world and that there was no better transportation here than carts. He answered the guard in the affirmative. He thought he didn't look strong because of the cloak Jit Li had given him. Jit Li hugged him and said that they had to part ways. He said that it had been a great honor to meet him. He said to contact him in the future if he needed anything. They said goodbye to each other. Minato watched Jit Li until he disappeared from view. They say that the Adventurers Guild is the best place to sell monster parts. Minato found the guild building. He thought, so this is where the adventurers gather. He had heard that there were many newcomers here, but everyone he saw looked stronger than him. He remembered what Jit Li had told him about the guild. Their main task was to carry out reconnaissance missions and destroy monsters, but first, they had to register with the guild. Second, newbies like him had to undergo training at the newbie center. Adventurers went through the stages of newbie, then experienced, then veteran. Mania was a good place to gain experience. He saw the tasks on the board, and they were all about destroying monsters. For example, there were tasks such as Mania Hair. The tasks were divided into ranks, and the reward was indicated. When he saw the Mania Bull task, he was stunned, wondering if the newbies would be able to defeat them. He looked closely at the tasks to see if there were any suitable for him. He had many everyday spells and one attack spell, and realized that the monster he had killed was not there. There were tasks such as picking flowers in Mishikuwa. Under different windows were the material purchase table and the quest table. He realized that it was time to go to the registration desk. He still had the money that Jit Li had given him, but he needed to earn his own money. He approached the registration desk, where a sign read, Guild Mania, Secretary Sierra. The girl there was looking for something and couldn't find it. She greeted him and asked if it was his first time at the guild. He answered yes. The girl gave him a form where everything was simplified and only 3 things needed to be filled out. He thought the girl was tall. He filled out the form, thinking that he didn't have a weapon and had never used one, and he put a cross. Today he learned an attack task and filled in the form that he was a mage. He thought that he didn't need a weapon yet, but if he needed one, he would buy it. He suddenly realized that he understood the language of this world, wondered if it was the effect of reincarnation, and realized that it was for the best. The girl asked him if he was finished. She took the form from him and asked if he was really a mage. He was surprised and asked if something was wrong. She asked again, saying that as a mage, he didn't have a magic wand. He asked if he needed a wand, and she took one out of the closet and gave it to him, telling him to try it. She said he needed it to stabilize and increase his magic. If he lost control, it would be dangerous for his teammates. He stood there stunned that it was just a simple, ordinary stick, but asked if he could use it. She replied affirmatively, telling him to see for himself how useful it was. He asked himself if the stick was really useful as he held it in his hands. He tried to draw a circle with the stick, as he had done before with a pen. He conjured a ball of light, and the girl was amazed by the light magic. He said he felt a surging power inside him. The girl, amazed by the light magic, said that Minato would be able to handle the dungeons, but he thought he would die in the dungeon if he used it there. He had learned the spell of the ball of light in elementary school so that he could go to the toilet at night. Transferring magic through a stick takes too much time and does not provide stability. The girl was delighted with the huge ball of light and would not use it. He thought that the girl had been instructed to praise beginners to boost their confidence, but then dismissed the idea, thinking that she was trying to sell him something. At that moment, he imagined how a swindler was foisting poor quality goods on a woman. The girl said that light magic is very important in dark dungeons, and he thanked her and said he would think about it and considered returning the wand. The girl held the wand in her hands and said it was beautiful, and asked if he had any other attributes besides the attribute of light. He was puzzled by this question. He couldn't answer, so the girl guessed that they hadn't been checked for attributes. She searched in the closet and took out some crystals. She said that the crystals would help find the attributes. She held them out to him and asked him to touch them. He wondered if she was going to sell them to him. He excitedly touched the crystals, and both lit up. The girl said that in addition to light, he had darkness, and that this was a rare combination. He asked if this was good or bad, as he had a strange premonition. In his past world, even though he was weak, he could control all 6 elements, and these attributes were used to create magic circles. These attributes were wind, earth, fire, water, light, and darkness. He had never heard of anyone possessing all of these attributes. He touched the other crystals. All the crystals lit up, and the girl screamed that he possessed all the attributes, wondering if he was a sage. He asked if it was strange to be a sage, and she shouted that, of course, it was extremely unusual. He thought it was just a trick to sell something. The girl said that 5 years ago there was a chief magician in the royal army, but when he died, there was no one else, and when people heard about the magician, they thought they had imagined it. People looked at him and wondered how he could be a sage, since he was a novice. He thought that this was not just praise, and he became convinced that few people could use the 6 attributes. He remembered one feeling, that it was nice to be recognized, but because of this he became a slave to the company. Everyone came to him for help, and he decided that being a wise man meant losing his freedom. He said that the result was wrong, and the crystals lit up from the residual effect of the ball of light. The girl was puzzled. He thought that among everyone, he was strong in wind magic, and if he was careful, everything would be fine. He asked to try again. He had to release no magical energy and concentrate on the tip of his finger. He pressed the crystal and thought he had succeeded. Everyone discussed how unfortunate it was that he was not a sage, and the girl asked why he was so excited. People also claimed that he had good abilities for reconnaissance. He asked if his registration was complete. She said that he was a mage who controlled 5 attributes except for wind, and gave him a guild card. Minato's rank was also written on the card. The brochure for newcomers contained all the details. The girl told Minato to attend the lectures for new adventurers. She signed him up for the nearest lecture. The girl told Minato that training novice adventurers was much more difficult than he thought, and that he should not eat too much and try his best. Minato arrived at the training ground. He stood near a wooden fence. He wondered with interest what new things he would learn at the adventurer camp. Attributes and wands didn't matter. But magic must be different from the magic of his past life. The newbies were fighting with swords at the training ground, and it was unknown what awaited the wise Minato. The newbies were fighting when their leader arrived. He asked them why the 3 of them still couldn't defeat one person. Monsters are stronger and faster than humans. Minato thought that this was the very class for beginners, and remembered how the girl warned him not to go there on a full stomach. The leader pointed to the guy sitting down and told him to fix the fact that he was standing too far away from his opponent, but praised him for his good sword skills. This meant that he would be able to defeat the rabbit. Turning to the others, he said that they were working poorly and that they should not underestimate the monster. He told them to rest for now. The beginner's class was necessary for people to learn their strengths and what tasks they were suited for. The leader said that the guy who mastered the 5 elements would be next. Minato clenched his fists and asked if he would have to fight too, but the instructor just smiled in response. The boy sighed as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The instructor laughed that he wouldn't have to fight because he was a mage. He said he had heard about him and asked if he could use offensive magic. The boy replied that he only knew one spell, to which the instructor replied that it was enough for a beginner. He gave him a task to choose one of the targets and hit it accurately. The guy remembered how the girl had asked him if he was sure he wanted to register as a mage, and thought that people here had a strange attitude towards mages. He stood there thinking, looking at the 5 targets. He realized that they wanted to test the speed of his attack, and created a magic circle. With a wave of his hand, he created a magic circle. The instructor was surprised that he did it without a wand. The guy said that he was not a master of offensive magic but would be careful and focus on speed. He prepared the circle. The target was detected. The countdown began. Minato raised the circle with his hands, saying that each strike would take about 2 seconds. The second second passed. Everyone was shocked by what they saw. The third and fourth seconds passed. People grabbed onto wooden structures so as not to fly away, and finally, the last 5th second came and an explosion thundered. All 5 targets were burned. The people at the training ground were stunned. Minato breathed a sigh of relief and wiped the sweat from his brow. He looked at the burning targets and asked if he had overdone it. The instructor said he couldn't believe his eyes. The instructor said that it was the first time he had seen such magic used, and that these targets had multi-level protection and could not be burned with ordinary magic. The instructor called Magicus to help, as he couldn't handle it himself. A guy with black and white hair appeared and introduced himself as Magicus, the magic instructor of the Mania Guild. Minato was surprised. Magicus descended with his magic wand, and was surprised that the novice had the power to use offensive magic. Pointing his wand at the card, he was convinced that he possessed magic. Minato watched as magic formed around the wand and was upset, asking if the mages could fight here. Magicus answered in the affirmative and said that mages stand behind swordsmen and archers and play a supporting role. Minato told himself that he now understood why mages were treated this way, and in his imagination, the girl at the reception desk apologized for it. The mage said that he used magic to create the right conditions for swordsmen and archers to attack, such as blinding the enemy, and said that the boy could do enormous damage. The guy asked if they could use offensive magic, since he had studied it, but they said no. The mage said that he could become the main attacker in any high-ranking squad. The instructor and the guys stood rooted to the spot when they heard this, and Minato was surprised, saying that he was now a real adventurer. They shook hands. The mage said he would write a letter of recommendation if he wanted to become the head of the country. Minato politely declined. The guy said that ruling a country he knew nothing about would be suicide, since he had registered as an adventurer, and the mage agreed. After thinking for a moment, the guy asked why some mages were weak in offensive magic. The instructor and the mage were taken aback by this question, and the instructor replied that they were not weak, but quite normal. The mage said that the best adventurer mages could use lightning magic like Minato, but in rare cases, it was very costly, and mana ran out after 3 strikes. The guy was surprised, holding the terminal in his hands, and calculated that if each strike consumed so much energy, he would be able to use up all 500. He was amazed that the spells on the device were so cool and thanked him. He had only managed to learn 1, so it would not be surprising if he encountered beasts that were resistant to lightning magic. The guy imagined how he would have cast a spell on the bull, sealing its fate, but the bull would not have suffered any damage. He said that he wanted to learn more offensive spells and asked if there were any books on them. The instructor and the mage were surprised because the guy was already so strong without them. The guy was upset that he only knew 1 offensive spell. The girl at the reception desk said that if he wanted to practice magic, he could find monsters in the forest on the north side of the city. He thanked her and left. The girl waved her hand and thought that the boy was determined. The boy reached the forest, found the book, and thought about what to do next. He remembered the girl who told him to try his best and love his work. Looking at how many pages there were in the book, he wasn't sure he could read it all. The mage had said that the book of magic spells was good for advanced levels. He began to open the book to find out what offensive spells existed in this world, and was surprised why magicians who read such books were so weak. He thought he had missed something important, that the theory of the magic circle was used for peaceful purposes. He thought about it and summoned the magic vault. The magic circle was constructed. He did everything according to the instructions, placed his palm on the circle, copied it, transferred it, and rewrote it in his notebook. He was able to create the fire magic that the instructor had used and thought that this meant power. He sat and thought that the magic circle of the lightning spell was too simple, and there was a lot of repetition, some parts even blending into the flow. He decided to remove unnecessary spells, thinking that if he did so, the time it took to create the magic circle would be reduced from 10 minutes to 1 minute. He built the magic circle. He made sure that without the unnecessary parts, the spell would become even stronger. He thought that thanks to his school knowledge, he would improve his magic circles and become a powerful adventurer. He sat there, happy that he had succeeded, when a girl passed by and was surprised to find that she was not alone in the forest. He was holding a notebook with the words, Minato's Secret, written on it, which he called his homemade book on offensive magic, and wanted to start casting a spell. The girl hid and watched, wanting to understand what he was doing. He created a magic circle. The circle glowed. He realized that the magic circle was absorbing mana through his body. He felt his palm tense up and raised his hand in a dance of fiery whirls. He was delighted that he had succeeded, but immediately realized that he had burned everything around him and created water magic. He commanded a blessing of rain, and it began to rain. The girl standing behind him was stunned by what she saw. Rejoicing, he wanted to try a couple more spells, and the girl watched him. He woke up to the bright sunshine, and it was already morning. He yawned and realized that he was indeed in another world as he looked at the newcomer in the dining room. He was served breakfast and asked if he had slept well. A man who saw him with a book asked if he was improving with the offensive magic reference book. He replied that although he had learned many improved spells, he had stayed up late and got too carried away with his studies. The man said that he was saying strange things and that people in this world did not improve their magic. If he was a traveler, he should go to the guild for a quest. Minato was interested. Jitli's money would last for a while, but he thought he should try the improved quests. The guild was full of people who wanted to get Mania guild bulletins. He asked the girl if there were any quests available, but she yelled at him that he was late and asked him to leave. Looking closely at the quests, he found one where someone was willing to pay 300,000 zigs for the use of several attack spells. He was delighted that he would be able to do so, and he had once heard that mages only earned 100,000 a month, and he would be able to test his attack spells without encountering monsters. The crowd laughed at him, and one of them said that mornings in Mania begin with a battle for assignments. Minato was lost in the crowd. The girl said it was his first lesson. He grabbed the quest and asked the girl if it was dangerous. She replied that it wasn't. It was a normal quest to collect magic stones in the ruins and was safe for a rank 1 traveler. The girl thought that beginners would fail this quest because there were almost no stones left in the ruins. If he had a higher rank, she would have recommended several quests. She urged him to raise his rank as soon as possible. He recalled that the reference book mentioned that travelers had a system called ranks. The higher the rank, the greater the rewards. To raise your rank, the first requirement was to successfully complete a task and demonstrate your combat abilities and achievements, and the second requirement was to pass tests given by mentors. He said it was troublesome. He said he would take on this task and focus on testing improved spells, and the girl agreed. To find the magic stones, he needed to find the least explored place. The area near the city had probably been dug up thoroughly, so he had to start with distant places and gradually move closer. He thought about where to start while he was out in the field. His stomach growled, and he realized he was hungry and needed to eat. He was worried about his eating habits when he first settled here, but the hotel owner made him some pies, and as he bit into one of them, he thought it was simple but delicious. When he sat down to eat, a girl approached him from behind, sensing the smell of food. He asked where this little animal came from, gave her one of the pies, and they both began to eat. The girl said that he was the man with the fiery flower. At first, he did not understand her words, but then he decided that she had seen him practicing his improved spells. Watching her eat, he thought that she really did look like a small animal. She said the food was delicious, then remembered that he had caused the rain. She asked him where he was going, and he replied that he was going to the ruins to collect magic stones. She pointed to the mountain and asked if that was where he was going. Minato said yes, and that he planned to explore the farthest place. She said it was a little exciting behind the triangle. He asked again, and she replied affirmatively, saying that her heart was pounding with excitement. She said there were treasures and monsters there, but he could probably handle them. He asked her, probably wanting to make sure she didn't doubt him. She said her name was Amy. He told her his name. She said she had to run and forgot about the test. He sat there wondering why she had a sword and wanted to become a traveler. She ran off, and he wished her luck with the test. He reached the ruins. They say it's safe here, but he decided to stay alert and be careful. He saw reinforced concrete and wondered why the buildings in Mania were old-fashioned while the ruins were more advanced. He remembered how Amy called the ruins exciting. He thought she wanted to warn him about something. He wondered about the civilization of this world. He found a secret door with the words, "Use magic to open the door," written on it. He thought it would be easy, and it seemed that no one had opened this door before him. He touched the step on the staircase. The dagger was pointed straight at him. Something terrifying appeared inside the hole. He couldn't understand what it was, threw the knife aside, and was surprised to see that it was a monster knife. Holding them in his hands, he said they looked more like a magical machine than a monster, saw that it had active legs, and decided that it was trying to attack him. He remembered that Amy had said he would manage, but he hadn't found a single magic stone or tried any new spells. He decided that the girl's words were his motivation and that he had to keep going. He walked through the tunnel and thought that the air was stagnant. There were cobwebs everywhere, and he wondered why this place had not been explored, asking himself the question. The administrator had said that this was a relatively safe task, but he had been attacked and needed to be more careful. Stopping in front of the door, he thought it looked suspicious. He knocked, but no one answered, and he thought that it was closed, that perhaps behind the closed door there was a place where no adventurer had ever set foot. He decided it was time to test his improved spells and built a magic circle. He used a fire cannon and opened the door with a powerful jet of fire. When the door opened, a multitude of monster knives rushed at him. He made an ice, fire, and wind cannon and decided that the task was definitely not for a beginner. He was surprised that his improved spells did not work, and he could not deliver the decisive blow. In addition, there were too many knives, and he thought he would die if they hit him, so he decided to calm down. He thought about which spell to use. He had neutralized some of them, and, by rough estimate, there were about 100 left. He remembered the lightning magic. He learned that to deal with uncontrollable magical machines, they used lightning. Initially, the spell only released one lightning spear at a time, but he had improved it so that it could now release several copies in half a second. He directed the magic at the monster's knives, praying that it would work. The attacking knives all fell to the floor, and he breathed a sigh of relief. Constant use of lightning magic was more exhausting than he had thought. He'd spent a lot of energy to get there and hoped it was worth it. The administrator was surprised that Minato had brought 240 blue magic stones. One stone cost 30,000 zigs, the guy replied calmly and positively. She said that the maximum they had ever brought in was about 100 pieces and that these stones are very rare and of high quality. He said he was just lucky and asked if the guild could buy them. Multiplying in her head that it would be 7,200,000 zigs, she said of course they had the funds. She said that this was a great achievement, enough to raise his rank, and that this was a chance for him to move up in the ratings. She said that he would have to take an obedience test to show all his combat abilities. Looking at the tasks, he said that it would suit him. He said that, first of all, he had come to Mania to sell one thing, and asked everyone to step back and summon storage magic. He took out a huge boar and threw it on the floor. Everyone was shocked and asked where he got it from. He thought that people in this world had small storage spaces. Suddenly, Jitley appeared and said that he couldn't explain why his storage space was a little larger than usual. Everyone was shocked. In the old world, the carrying capacity was 3 tons, but in this world it was 30 tons. He asked to check if there was a task to subdue this monster. People looked at the monster and said it was a bark boar and a pretty strong monster. The administrator said that he had raised his rank, the first condition being to successfully complete the task and demonstrate his combat abilities. The second condition for raising his rank was to complete a test given by the teacher. The girl called the teacher, saying that a test was required for recertification. Minato was taken aback and told them to wait. He said he didn't want to raise his rank now. The teacher said that he had passed, and the test for rank promotion was approved. The administrator said that the teacher had told her that Mr. Minato was an exception and did not have to take the test, and the others were shocked. The girl congratulated Minato on his rank promotion, and he stood there realizing it. Everyone rushed over to congratulate Minato. Some invited him to go hunting, others warned him about the dangers and that he could now take on higher-ranked missions. He approached the task board to take on a task. He picked a simple task with no rank, to gather musicure grass, but people shouted at him not to take it. He stood near the special training center, asking himself what he thought about it. He took one task and was surprised because it was a morning quest, in which you could get 300,000 zigs by shooting offensive spells. People said that if an adventurer failed a task, it would be posted again, so you had to prepare carefully before completing it. Someone said that someone had stolen it in the morning. This quest was given by Seekers of Wisdom, and before starting, a test would be conducted to check the destructive power of the spells. The guy became interested in this. People said that the people who ordered the quest were important people who rarely posted quests, and they were surprised that he didn't know them. The Seekers of Wisdom are a group consisting of 2 people, a mage and a swordsman, focused on researching ancient runes. The task stated that it was possible to refuse the test after learning its essence. The guy thought that the task was not too difficult, and if he wanted to learn about the ruins and magical machines, it was worth taking on. He thought he would first find out who they were. The guy fell into thought. He came to them and was surprised that the 2 girls were Seekers of Wisdom. They were also discussing him. Suddenly, the mage screamed, pointing to something, saying that a monster was coming. The guy wanted to know where the monsters were and where they came from. Amy also did not understand what had happened to Mina. Mina asked where he got so much mana. The guy asked if she was asking him. Amy said that Mina was able to see other people's mana with her magical vision. He was surprised by this. They said that Minato could use 5 attributes. He thought that the mage was avoiding him. He looked at the girl and thought that she had a special ability, magical vision, and he felt embarrassed when she looked at him too. She told Amy that he had all 6 attributes, and he was afraid that he had been exposed. Amy said that more attributes meant more power, and he could help them. Mina didn't understand why she was so calm. The guy thought that Amy needed success more than how many attributes he had. Mina whispered that this man's mana was comparable to that of an archdragon. Amy cried out that he was not human, and the mage confirmed that she also thought he looked like a monster. He stood there thinking that they needed to learn tact. Mina was the brains of the team, and Amy was the muscle. He had to earn their trust. They trembled with fear when he asked what the test should be. The mage told him to hit the target with fire magic. Instead of a target, there was a toy. He created a magic circle. He released fire butterflies, and they flew straight to the target. The girls were stunned by what they saw. They said it was beautiful. The butterflies instantly burned the toy, and the girls said it was deadly. Amy said that the target was above the burned rabbit, and he said that was enough, thinking he had messed up. The magician thought he had strange and powerful magic. He thought that if she avoided him, he would accept it. Amy ran up to the guy and asked what kind of spell it was, amazed by what she saw. Thinking that she didn't care, he replied that he had learned it from a book. When he showed her the book, the magician ran up, shouting that it was a guide to offensive magic, and asked how far he had read it. He replied that he had read the entire book. She took the book and said that Minato had passed the test, and that those who carry this book cannot be bad. He thought she was obsessed with grimoires. She said that she was going to get rid of her old toys anyway, and that there was nothing wrong with him burning it. He thought that she was no longer afraid of him, and she said that the spell was very beautiful and she liked it. Returning the book to the guild library worked in his favor. He imagined the administrator asking for the book back. Mina said that the spell was not described in the book, and that only a great magician was capable of it, but there was something that bothered her. He thought she was afraid of him again. At that moment, Amy ran up and asked to discuss the assignment. Amy was extremely eager to fight to get a lot of treasure, while Mina poured them tea. Amy asked if he understood, but he thought that nothing was clear from her conversation. He asked Mina to explain the plan of action. But he understood something. They wanted to explore the ruins, but there were many monsters there, and she needed an ally to help defeat them. They said they needed to get ready, and he had a feeling that this wasn't just a simple quest where they would shoot a couple of attacking spells. He said he hadn't decided yet whether to join them. They were stunned by his words. He thought it was a bad idea to rush headlong into something without knowing the whole story. He thought that contracts should always be signed with caution, and told them that the quest said he could refuse once he knew the details. Amy shouted that she wanted to go with him and that there was a lot of treasure there. Mina wanted to explain, but Amy wouldn't let her speak. Minia said that the task guaranteed 30,000 zigs. In addition, after successfully exploring the ruins, he would receive half of the trophies. Amy shouted that this was different from the original plan. Minato was suspicious, and why give half and not a third? It seemed too good to be true. She asked him what he thought, and he agreed. Mina reassured Amy by saying that they had previously planned to hire 10 people and each of them would receive 5%, so everything remained the same. Amy was surprised, but agreed. He asked if they had planned to hire 9 more people, studied their words that the plan remained the same but still had questions. Mina said that she wanted to hire more people, but apart from him, they couldn't find anyone else who could wield offensive magic well. He realized that in this world, few people were capable of using offensive magic. Mina said that he was stronger than the 10 people they needed. that she would guide him in attacking, and that perhaps her help would not be needed. Both stared intently at him. He thought about it. He realized that initially they wanted to give him 5% of the loot, then increased the reward, and remembered how his colleague, when he suddenly quit, came to do double the work for the same money. He asked how dangerous the job was, thinking that was the key point. The girls were surprised. Mina asked a counter-question, are there any adventures that don't involve danger? He smiled to himself, thinking that the young girls were beginning to radiate the aura of seasoned adventurers. Amy said that if she smelled something burning, she might run away. Mina confirmed that she would do the same. He thought that if he couldn't rely on them, he would have to decide everything himself, as he had always done in his past life. The profession of an adventurer seemed free to him, and he would get half of the spoils, and he had spells that would allow him to escape in an unforeseen situation. He shook their hands, saying that he was looking forward to working with them, deciding that he needed to cement his reputation as an adventurer. The night before departure, the three of them stood talking. Amy boasted that she was a fast runner, and Mina said she was just as fast. He couldn't sleep, he was too excited. He decided to get up, thinking that Amy would go after the monsters first, since the mages only played a supporting role. He didn't want to be protected. Half of the trophies would go to him, and he needed to make an effort. Improving his spells, he familiarized himself with how they worked, came up with his own spell, and started with the basics. He thought that the book contained the simplest magic circles, which required little mana, and that it contained tricks that could be cast for a long time. He imagined how Mina would react. Based on them, he wanted to create a powerful offensive spell that required little mana but had great power. He made the spell, looked at the circle, and decided that it would require 80% mana. He reworked the wording and wanted to see how powerful it would be. Its power was astonishing. He left it for later, thinking that if the spell got out of control, the three of them would die. He came to the ruins. The girls were not there. He did not like that. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a monster. He found the girls. They were about to attack a bat. Mina warned that his magic was accumulating on his horn. Amy went on the attack. Mina said it was a Mizia bat. If they had received the quest, they would have gotten at least 30,000 zigs. Amy teased Minato that they had defeated the monster without his help. Amy stood covered in blood, grabbing the monster's head and saying that now it was Minato's turn to kill monsters. It looked bloodthirsty, and he wanted to avoid monsters more often. Mina told her to wipe the blood off. They moved effortlessly through the ruins. Mina suggested going down the spiral staircase. He looked around, thinking about what kind of ruins Mina and Amy had found. To follow them, he had to use strengthening magic. He thought they were moving faster than other beginners, and he said that the place was huge. They told him they would go all the way to the bottom. It was the first time he had seen such extensive ruins. The entrance was covered with dense vegetation, and the stone was thick enough that to get in, one had to be perceptive and experienced in exploring ruins. He thought that Mina had found this place, but she said that it was Amy who had found it. Amy said she just stumbled upon these ruins while walking. Amy smelled a pleasant scent and went there. He thought that ordinary people did not have such a keen sense of smell. She was special. She found the treasure. He was amazed by her abilities and called her a genius at exploring ruins. Sniffing around, she discovered something else interesting. He thought she was like a treasure hunter. He looked closely at the place where she found the treasure and thought he would not have been able to find anything, and wondered if she was unconsciously using search spells. He remembered that when they first met, she had also sniffed him and wondered if she had seen something in him. He asked if she had found the ruins she was showing him by smell, and she replied in the affirmative, saying that she simply couldn't open the door there, thinking that Minato had probably opened it. He said there were many magic stones there, and the monsters were just as dangerous. Amy asked what color they were. He replied, blue. She said that these stones were the most valuable, and that he could consider it her way of thanking him for lunch. He was surprised that she wanted to thank him. Mina began to ask why she suddenly started sniffing him, and Amy teased her in response. Mina thanked him for sharing his food with her, and Amy said that it smelled nice here. He decided not to tell her that there were 240 stones. He thought he didn't know what was behind the door, but the room had an evil aura, and they were standing in front of it. He thought his job was to attack with offensive magic. He accepted it and couldn't slip up. He thought that the sooner he finished, the sooner he would go home, while Mina knocked on the door with her staff. Mina said that it could be destroyed by destroying the core, and that it had a weakness to fire. Amy got ready and asked Minato if he was ready for battle. He replied that he was always ready. Inside stood a huge golem, completely covered in stone armor. First, Amy had to distract it. The battle began, and she did a great job. This strategy is effective against opponents who lack intelligence. Amy distracted it with all her might, and Minato wondered if his stones weighed tons and if everything would go well. Golems regenerate instantly, and damage can only be inflicted with magic. No matter how many times Amy struck him with her sword, he regenerated. While Amy distracted the enemy, Mina thanked her for buying them time. Minato was surprised by her fighting skills and reflexes. Mina used her magical vision to find the core, found it, and told him to watch where she was shooting, thinking it would be a good lesson for him since he was used to fighting monsters. She hit the target and then hit it again, shouting at him to help. Minato, watching Mina's attacking magic, thought her magic was weak. Apparently she wanted to show the target where to attack. He sent an improved fireball. A large fireball crashed into Gomel. He gathered several fireballs, which frightened Mina. He said that he always gives his all. He thought that now his task was to replace the 10 mages they wanted to hire, and he had to do it properly, and first he had to destroy the core. So he created an improved fireball. He looked at Mina's expression and thought he wasn't doing well, but he destroyed it on the first try. He asked if she wanted him to make the spell stronger and began to do so. Amy couldn't see anything because of the smoke. Golems can regenerate. A dozen hits might be enough. She said the battle would be long, but if he destroyed it, that function would be useless, and Mina wondered why she had set the target. He sent more and more, knowing he had to give it his all. The girls were tired of the explosions. Everything around them was exploding. Amy stood up and asked where the golem was, saying that it had disappeared. Mina pointed to a pile of stones and said he was there. Minato thought he had gone too far. Amy asked in surprise if he was really a monster. Mina insisted that she had mentioned it. He asked if he had done his job, and they looked at him with frightened eyes. He thought they wanted to change the terms. They said they would hand over the loot. He thought the task was complete. They begged him with pleading eyes to go with them. He thought that meant they could still rely on him and that he should continue hunting, remembering the overtime in the past world. Amy's clear voice echoed through the huge 3-story building. She was actively looking for something and instantly let you know where she was. Minato listened intently, but he couldn't figure out where the monsters were. He searched inside the wall boxes, under the rocks, but couldn't find anything on his own. Suddenly, a faint but persistent smell passed under his nose. He caught the scent instantly and was glad to guess that he now had the ability to sense the treasure too, and then turn his gaze in the direction where the smell was coming from. But in reality, it was Mina, who had already built a fire, hung the large pot over it, and started cooking. The girl cheerfully announced to her companions that it was time for lunch. Minato noticed that she looked almost like a grandmother from an old fairy tale. Aimee, on the other hand, was hanging down merrily, happily enjoying the upcoming treat. The heroes carefully placed boxes next to each other so that they could sit down and put hot food on them. Mina served them each a portion of the fragrant broth, and Amy and Minato immediately grabbed their bowls. A broth with some meat and rolls was placed in front of the hungry travelers. In his previous life, Minato couldn't afford such a big meal and only ate boxed lunches bought at the supermarket. He decided that he needed to thank the girls. As soon as he took the first spoonful, he seemed to drown in ecstasy, struck by the perfect roasting of the meat. Although the smell of wild animals was still slightly noticeable, the taste was so rich and beautiful that it didn't matter. Mina immediately reported that it was the meat of frogs caught by Minato. But Minato wasn't bothered by the meat he was eating. The main thing is that the meat is edible and delicious. After a hearty lunch, the heroes continued exploring the deeper parts of the ruins. The walls of the ruins were like a maze, but Amy, with her keen sense of smell, led the way confidently. Minato cleared the path of monsters, sparing small creatures, and Mina left traces and helped her magic vision to repel attacks. Combining their strengths and responsibilities, Minato, Mina, and Aimee gradually developed into a real, cohesive team of adventurers. Minato was soon asked by Mina to protect Aimee so that she could explore the ruins without any problems. Since the young man was able to deal with the monsters with ease, their exploration should have been several times faster. Minato also noted Mina's excellent eyesight. The girl easily identified the weak points of enemies and immediately pointed out their vulnerability to certain attributes, thanks to which his own effectiveness increased significantly. Embarrassed by the praise, Mina waved her hands and quickly retorted that it was all due to Minato, because he was able to use any attribute, so it seems to her that everything turns out so easily. The guy was amused by the girl's reaction, but he is grateful for her help, because he had problems with monsters without her abilities, noting their weakness before lightning. He was happy with the team he had formed and the state of affairs. Mani asked the heroes what their next plan of action was. The rest of the trip was up to Amy and her instincts. The girl, who was deliciously eating her teammate's concoction, was distracted by her own mention. Minato thought that Amy might think about it, but he noticed that Amy was completely focused on her food. The heroes decided to explore the area a little more and leave the remaining cases for the next day. In any case, they want to get as much value out of here as possible. Minato continued to wonder how Aimi didn't care about anything as much as the food itself. When she was done with the broth, she set her empty plate on a chair and shifted in her seat, thinking. The guy, watching the girl, also noticed that she managed to eat the whole cauldron, but from long thoughts, the girl only got a headache. Mina was very shocked that the girl was actually thinking a lot, but Minato was thinking a lot, wondering if Aimi was thinking a little, or if she was acting without thinking at all. But when she came back to reality, Aimi confidently stated that they needed to move out, pointing her finger at their place of further investigation. She warned that there might be quite a strong opponent on the way. The guys asked the girl if he is so strong as a golem, to which she replied that she did not know what puzzled Minato. Even if she didn't know the strength of the upcoming enemy, she could smell the treasure that was waiting for them. She noted that the enemy can be strong, which even scared the girl. A strong opponent, after which travelers were waiting for a valuable treasure. Mina considered Amy's words. She asked the boy if he could still fight, to which Minato replied that he could handle it if the enemy's strength was equal to the golem's. Aime suddenly asked him directly if he had exhausted all of his mana during the time he was fighting the monsters. Mina didn't let him answer, but immediately explained to her friend that his mana level had only slightly decreased. Amy was so surprised that her mouth dropped open. Minato realized that Mina could see his mana level in real time and that there was no way to hide anything from her. The girl sighed. The girl took the staff, confidently placed it in front of her, and deftly turned it in her hands, explaining that all the work of adventurers ultimately comes down to finding rare and valuable treasures. But if they encounter a serious problem, they will have to immediately run away. The heroes marked their weapons, and Minato took out his notebook and made a sign of agreement, accepting the conditions set out. He smiled and agreed to the terms. Without wasting any time, Aimi immediately headed for the exit towards the unknown, eager to continue her treasure hunt. Mina carefully collected the cauldron and put it away in the magic portal. Amy, trying to squeeze through the narrow passageway, stretched out her arm to reach the balloon. After successfully grabbing it, she immediately opened the magic vault to put the item she caught there. But the balloon slid off the portal. It flew out of the window and down to where Minato was standing. The girl managed to reach out and grab the falling ball. The guy noticed her. Amy turned to Minato and asked if he had any space available in the spatial storage, because it turned out to be already full, which caused the balloon to fly off. He agreed to take her find, and the girl threw him a balloon. He managed to bend down to catch the ball, which almost fell to the ground. The girl decided not to save only a ball and continued to pass the found things to the guy. Minato opened the portal and held it above him so that things would fall directly into it. The girl laughed out loud and thanked the guy. He noticed that there were not only magic spheres and gems, but also magic items. Among the piles of magical items found, there was also an old walkie-talkie that he immediately recognized from his previous life. Mina, who was behind the guy, explained to him that it was a magic transmitter. This is an advanced device that ancient people used to communicate at a distance. Minato noted that although he hadn't used a walkie-talkie in his previous life, the device's operating principle was surprisingly similar to that of a phone. Mina noted the value and rarity of the items, and the guy noticed her resemblance to a secretary who transmits information. He asked her how expensive it was. Mina smiled mischievously and announced the price of 20 million sig apiece, which actually meant 20 million yen. Minato realized that if the heroes returned home safely, they would be able to sell the magic transmitter they found for such a sum and live in peace, while she added that Minato would receive exactly half of the ransom amount. After examining the items found, the guy noticed a thing similar to a transmitter, only it was without antennas. He immediately remembered seeing something similar before. When he first came to this world, the circle-like thing taught him attacking magic for survival. The magic information terminal could display a map and search for information. It also had a voice assistant installed and, compared to the transmitter, it was much more efficient. Minato became interested in the value of this item. He proudly informed Mina that the item he found was much better than the transmitter he had found before and asked about the price. The girl was surprised by the find. Picking up the item, the girl noticed that it was still useless, and the guy did not find what to say to such a direct statement. She called out to Aimi, who immediately ran up to the guy and the girl, while Minato was wondering why she didn't like the magic terminal so much. Mina asked the girl not to pick up such unnecessary things. Aimi understood her companion and, with a smile on the street, said goodbye to the junk, throwing it aside. She went back to her work, adding that she would pay attention to the things she found. Minato, on the other hand, was shocked by the scene and used magic to catch the falling magic terminal. After grabbing the item safely, he took it in his hands. Mina reminded him that this thing was useless and sighed, but the guy asked her to give him something to try. He opened a terminal that looked like a push-button phone. By pressing the start button, the terminal did not respond in any way. The girl shot him an uneasy look, as if trying to soften his obvious failure in his plan. But Minato didn't agree to himself. He was sure that the terminal wasn't broken at all, just feeding on mana, which he didn't have at the moment. He immediately realized that charging would require some kind of adapter and an infusion of power. Mina tilted her head slightly and asked what exactly he meant, and the guy, in turn, was surprised at her ignorance, because it was quite possible to transfer mana to items. Even an expert in studying ruins didn't know this, and the gap in knowledge is simply huge. He had to find out on his own and not rely on others. Meanwhile, Aimi finished her research and returned to her companions. Minato was sure that if he could find the magic information terminal, there must be a suitable adapter somewhere. Aimi ran over to them. She informed them that they needed to get back as soon as possible, which Minato and Mani immediately turned their attention to. They ran after the girl, asking her what had happened and if they were monsters, but Amy couldn't give an exact answer. Minato called out to Mina to use her magic vision and inform her that they should head to the right tunnel. But the door closed behind them. Closing with a bang, Aimi couldn't slow down and hit the iron. After her, Miney also hit. Minato moved away from the girls and began to look around. Aimi also noticed something was wrong while Mani was holding her face in pain. The heroes were trapped. The rear exit, like the others, slammed shut. It might not just be in the room they were in, but it might be in all the doors that are in the ruins. The sound of the doors closing gave off a strong rumble, which shook the ground and kept the guy and girls on their feet. Amy, slamming her hands against the iron gate, asked the guy to destroy the doors with his magic. The guy drew a magic circle in his notebook, then extended his hand forward, causing a fire bullet to appear. He was standing in front of the door, directing his power in that direction. Aimi stood off to the side to protect herself. A small smoke billowed out from the impact. However, the strike was unsuccessful. Minato assumed that the doors were made of a magic-resistant material. If he continued, he might be able to destroy the gate, but there will be other gates waiting for them ahead, which will also have to be destroyed. He started thinking about their rescue plan and asked Mani if she had a plan, but the girl was unconscious. Minato and Amy quickly ran over to help the fallen girl. He speculated that Mina might have fainted from seeing an unusual source of mana while Amy was trying to bring her companion back to consciousness. The girl immediately opened her eyes. Standing up, she informed Minato to be ready to defend himself. Without hesitation, he stood up and formed a protective barrier in front of him and the girls, which immediately deflected a powerful blow. They were surrounded by walls that could not withstand the destructive power that the heroes managed to defend themselves from. Even if they were surrounded by ruins, there was a further path that they could follow. Minato asked if the girls were okay, to which Aimi covered her mouth from the dust that had become and replied that she was fine. He wondered where they were being attacked from. From the pile of rocks, Aimi noticed a metal object with sharp blades all around it. It was a machine that had been absorbed by some energy and was spreading its limbs. Their upcoming opponent, the metal dragon, was 3 times the size of the travelers. Its eyes were fixed on them, and fire blazed from its metal mouth. Minato recalled the conditions that were announced before. If they encounter a serious problem, they must run away. The metal dragon began to roar. However, it was unlikely that they would be able to escape to an opponent of this level, and they were trapped within these ruins. Aimi grabbed Minato's hand out of fright, while Mani held her staff tightly, saying that they were finished. The metal opponent pointed its huge and heavy tail towards the team. This was immediately noticed by the guy and pushed the girls away from him, taking the impending blow. The dragon pushed the boy down. Minato suddenly fell down, and the confused girls looked at him, unable to do anything to help. With a crack, he hit the ground, which was now covered in his blood. The dragon continued its fierce attack, and threw the injured body of the youth into the wall. The girls screamed his name in frustration. As he fell back to the ground, Minato remembered being hit by a magic car in his previous life. A cough of blood came out of his mouth. But with all his strength, he carefully got up from his seat. Thanks to the tragedy from his previous life, he was able to think straight in a shock situation. Placing his hand in the area of his stomach, he decided to strengthen the magic first. Minato got to his feet in front of the huge opponent and realized that he was focused on him. From numerous injuries and blows, the condition and appearance of the guy was intimidating. His face was smeared with blood, as well as his fingers. He opened a series of magic circles to escape from the dragon. These magic circles he directed towards the dragon, attacking it with them. The fire bullets that emerged from the circles stunned the metal dragon. He made sure that this would be enough to distract his opponent for the time being. But the dragon didn't stagger from the multiple blows. Minato's attacks didn't even leave any impact marks on the monster's metal shell. The metal dragon was much stronger than the golem. He was about to attack the monster again, but Mina attacked the dragon from the other side. Amy was standing behind Mina, who was holding the staff that she used to launch the attack towards the monster. Minato was surprised that the girls didn't run away, but stayed with him, suggesting that the adventurers might not care about their lives. The metal dragon had sensors that could detect heroes even through walls. The guy noted that the monster managed to repel his projectile, which he had previously managed to destroy any monster. It was impossible to destroy the walls of the ruins, which only worsened their situation. The only way out was to defeat the dragon. Otherwise, they would be killed by the monster's metal paws. Amy stated that she would figure out how to defeat the monster. She was holding an ordinary-looking ball in one hand, and with the other hand she was holding a strange weapon on her belt, which puzzled the young man. The girl noted that these things are quite expensive. Using the weapon on her belt, the girl managed to fly towards the monster, and she continued to hold the ball in her hand. The guy watched her, noting that the weapon she found looked interesting. It circled over the dragon, forcing it to look away from the young man and follow the flying girl. Mani noticed the guy's condition and asked how he was feeling, but he said that everything was fine. After drinking the elixir, he asked Amy how she attacked the dragon with a glowing bowl in her hand. Amy looked down at the boy, said that everything was fine, and continued to deal with the dragon. Mina explained that this is a common magic weapon for provocation, and it emits a light that demons cannot resist. Minato was surprised at how simple it was. Amy called out to the boy. She assured him that she would do everything possible to anger the dragon as much as possible, and promised to do it in the blink of an eye. But the guy did not calm down, but only became more puzzled by the girl's words, not understanding what they were about. After all, Amy couldn't help but notice how even Minato's improved magic didn't work on the dragon. He had no idea which of his spells might have worked. At this time, the girl continued to cheerfully tease the dragon, but he came up with an idea. It was a spell he had thought up last night, and he had specially sealed it for safety's sake. Minato realized that they would be in trouble themselves if he used the sealed magic. At this time, Mina, who was standing behind him, was watching Amy and became concerned. The dragon, irritated by the girl's cheeky shouts, released a huge fireball in her direction. The explosion turned out to be a big one, and the girl flew out of it and continued to fly around the dragon while it attacked her back. The metal monster couldn't keep up with the girl. Mina clutched at the youth's cloak and called out his name. She decided to express her admiration for him because he managed to move in such a difficult situation while she herself was in a state of complete stupor. He did this with whatever magic he could use to kill the golem, and the girl asked him to do the same with the mechanical dragon. However, the guy in his thoughts noted that the current situation is very different from the past. He also asked the girl to find the dragon's weak points with her magic vision, but the girl, stammering with excitement, replied that the car was too strong, but could not finish her words. Amy, still distracting the monster, called out to Minato, begging for help, while Mina tried to finish her words. The guy also noted to himself that girls unwisely use their powers and seem to escape from reality. Smiling nervously, he was already mentally preparing to say goodbye to his second life. The dragon continued to attack the girl while she asked for his help. Minato knew that he was powerless against such a monster. He decided to use another spell from his notebook after realizing that the fireballs didn't attack the monster. However, if that doesn't work out, then he acknowledged it as his last fight. He raised his hand up, and shining magic circles began to open up above him. But Minato decided to take the risk, because waiting only meant certain death. The magic circles headed towards the dragon occupied by Amy. A fireball was formed from each magic circle. Fireballs exploded all over the mechanical monster's body, taking it by surprise. Mina stared in amazement at the massive attack from all directions that Minato unleashed on the enemy. The explosions continued, but even under the continuous blows, the mechanical dragon survived, and thick smoke billowed out of its mouth. When the explosion subsided, the monster shook itself, spreading its huge wings and sending up clouds of smoke. Mani stared in horror at the surviving monster and covered her mouth, not believing that even that didn't work, tears welling up in her eyes. But Minato explained that his attack was not aimed at destroying, but at finding a weak spot, and it ended up in a magic channel on the neck that twisted and twisted. Noticing a crack in this channel, the youth immediately attacked it with a thunder ray. The only remedy against such magic was lightning magic, and to break his defense, it was this element that was best suited. Minato saw that his tactics were working. It directly hit the channel crack around the neck. However, the dragon fixed a withering gaze on the heroes below, remaining almost unscathed from the attacks. The monster and Minato stared at each other in silence. The guy realized that to remove the metal from the dragon, the usual improved magic is not enough. Minato reached for his notebook, intending to use another magic, since they had no other choice. In his mind, he just hoped that this time they would be lucky. The dragon was already preparing to deliver a crushing blow. However, this attack was directed towards Aimi, who was standing on a pillar. She jumped back from the attack, surprised by the surprise. Minato also noticed the dragon's choice, since it was the dragon that posed a greater threat to the monster than the girl. Amy continued to dodge the attacks while holding the ball in her hands. The provocation of this magic item was stronger than he thought. The shattered pillar crashed down on top of the heroes, and Mina managed to protect herself and Minato with a barrier. The young man thanked the girl, who was holding her staff, holding her guard, and throwing a pile of rocks aside. In his mind, he wondered if this was a special form of defensive magic from their world. The battle had already partially destroyed the building, and among the rubble, Minato lost sight of the mechanical dragon. He sighed loudly and heavily. Slapping his cheeks, he tried to bring himself back to reality. He thought that he could not cope and would immediately die, but everything turned out differently. He should not be allowed to commit an act of self-sacrifice. He had forgotten the best course of action in this situation. He needed to trust people. He called out to Mina and smiled at her, startling her. He informed her that there was magic that they could use to defeat the mechanical dragon. Mina looked at him suspiciously, noticing that his face had changed as if he was up to something. Still keeping a smile on his face, he asked her to help, but she was unsure of his plan. Minato found himself trying to keep his smile serious and businesslike. But deciding not to argue with Mina, he immediately called Amy, which immediately puzzled the girl next to him, who did not understand what all this talk was about. The girl, who was still dodging the attacks, turned her attention to the guy who called her. Her instrument was already running out of magic. He shouted to her that the dragon didn't like her very much and asked her to climb as high as possible. As soon as she did, he asked her to throw the ball at his signal and return to the guys at full speed. Mani tried to stop the guy by asking him what he was going to do, but instead of explaining, he decided to show her. A magic circle opened above his palm, and a small sphere emerged from it. Soon, this sphere surrounded the guy and the girl, imagine in the image of a protective barrier. The girl, having touched the barrier, was surprised by Minato's protective magic and admitted that this was the first time she had seen such a spell. She wanted to continue her speech, but the guy interrupted her and handed her this spell, saying that she would be responsible for the safety of the team. He aimed a magic circle with a spell on her staff. The staff began to absorb the magic power of the protective barrier, and this greatly frightened the girl. But the guy only asked her to be patient and not worry. He noted that the girl wasn't using very effective defensive magic, and decided that if he used it himself, the cost would decrease and the power would increase. He moved his hand to the new magic circle drawn on the pad of paper. Deciding to use magic directly inside the walls that repelled her, he tried to release the excess energy, while casting a protective spell on Mina so that she would not be harmed. But he was honest with himself that it would take more time, but in this situation, they didn't have it. Amy screamed that the dragon was trying to grab her with its metal claws. Minato was surprised that she managed to get high enough for him to continue hunting her. He shouted a signal to the girl. With a cry and tears in her eyes, the girl threw a magic ball and told the dragon to grab onto it while Minato drew a magic circle above himself. He built a circle so large that it would fit the entire dragon while it was distracted. Black sparks shot out from the circle, which gradually engulfed the space. Minato managed to create some really crazy magic. To put the right magic into the circle at the right moment, the young man had to simplify the process as much as possible. The guy's stats have dropped a lot without taking into account his mana consumption, and magic consumption is only 8% of his total strength. Amy managed to fly to her companions. Distracted from the ball, the dragon turned its gaze towards the heroes under the protective barrier. Minato, meanwhile, realized that he was wasting his magic too quickly and needed to do something about it. The dragon directed its fiery attack at the sphere-shaped magic, from which black sparks were flashing. She located the target. The magic circle began to expand, taking up almost half the space of the building. A black glow enveloped everything around, and the dragon was directly above the growing sphere. Suddenly, a blinding light cut through the building. The mechanical dragon couldn't withstand the pressure of such force that black sparks enveloped its body. Minato smiled at the fact that he finally managed to defeat such a strong opponent, and kept his hands on the magic circle. The sphere engulfed the monster, and the dragon shuddered and soared up, bursting out of the ruins. In the sky, his body finally split and broke under the onslaught of magic. Its remnants rained down like iron rain. The heroes stood under the protective barrier and watched in mute amazement as the pile of metal fell. Aimi informed the boy that the dragon was falling right on top of them. He told Mina to change her defensive magic as soon as possible. But without wasting any time, he decided to change the defensive magic himself after seeing how the girl was in a stupor. The huge head of the mechanical dragon fell directly onto their defensive barrier. After confirming that it was over, he removed the barrier and calmly rejoiced that they had managed to win. Aimee called out to Minato in displeasure while Mina was unconscious. But just as they took a step forward, the ground beneath them cracked, and everyone collapsed. Not very comfortable landing, the guy noticed the weight on his back where the girls were lying. Looking around, he noticed that there were still floors below them that prevented them from escaping. Mina, having woken up, exclaimed with a question what kind of magic the guy used. Minato, on the other hand, calmed down after seeing that everyone was fine. The guy replied that he had only come up with this magic yesterday and was sure that it was his first magic that he used, which the girls were interested in. Sighing, he decided that they should go home after such a hard day, but Aimee smelled something delicious. The guy turned to her and asked her to stop, but the girl had already gone around the corner and called the guys to her. She said there was something big here. The guy approached the girl. They found themselves in front of a huge and empty jar with the number 13 on it and the inscription Deus Ex Machina, on top of which were installed a lot of cables. Minato, perplexed by the inscription on the strange capsule, couldn't resist asking aloud what it meant. At that moment, the equipment came to life, and information written in a foreign language flashed on the monitor screen. Returning to the city after a long day, the heroes settled down in a small room on the third floor, which was intended for meetings of the Minia Guild, and where they had to discuss everything they found. They lay down heavily on the table, exhausted, and Aimee said with a sad sigh that she was sorry to part with the mechanical dragon and that she would like to take it with her. Minato was suddenly reminded of a strange find in the ruins that bore a striking resemblance to the artificial magical intelligence that had once rampaged through his past life and left a deep impression on his memory. Mina doubted that Aimee would have been able to take the pile of metal from the dragon on her own, since it was huge in size and there was no place to store the material she found. The girl agreed with her observation with a sigh. Minato continued to think about the Deus Ex machine, which is created by combining 13 magical arithmetic units. It was believed that during the escape, all but 12 of the cars disappeared without a trace, but presumably they came to this world. Mina slammed her fist down on the table and said with exasperation that she was tired of these pitiful pennies and that it was time to do something really worthwhile. The young man came to the conclusion that, after all, they had run out of magic and energy. After they found out that the car was broken, they managed to retrieve the treasures from that room and return to the guild. The heroes sighed in unison after a hard day, glad that they at least survived after this. Aimee had a satisfied smile on her face and decided not to hide from her companions what she had managed to get through hard work. They collected 36 magic communicators worth 720 million sigs. Minato saw the girl's expression change, and a greedy grin spread across her face, promising new plans and possibly new adventures. A source of good flair, Aimee found magical transmitters and other equipment that were plentiful in the room with the dragon. Aimee herself was glad that she had managed to get her hands on these devices. She didn't expect the ransom amount to exceed her expectations, jumping around the room for joy as she could now afford the best meat in town. The guy was even happy with the sudden energy in her voice, and Mina herself asked him with keen interest what kind of meat he would like to try for dinner. But Mina, covering her eyes, said that they would not be able to cash out the money they received. Aimee, hearing the conversation, stopped with a puzzled look and stared at her friend. Then Mina, picking up one of the transmitters, explained that this find will be enough for production in the country for many years. She added that it would be extremely difficult to cash out such a huge amount at once in the guild. Aimee, disappointed, only wished she could taste the best meat because of it. After arranging a few communicators for each team member, Mina said that they should divide the items among themselves and immediately sell the other items to the guild in return. Minato was relieved that they had collected 36 transmitters, and it was easier to distribute them. The girls got 9 each, and the boy got 18. To defuse the situation, Aimee decided to play a prank and suddenly found herself behind her friend, trying to scare her. Mina, frightened, did not appreciate the joke and sharply asked not to do so because she was near crystals that could explode at the slightest mistake. Keeping such a dangerous item in one's personal hands was strictly forbidden, and so it had to be sold to the guild immediately. Aimee, in her light-hearted way, suggested simply not letting the magic power flow, to which Mina retorted sharply that she would never allow such a stupid thing to happen. Minato noted that a similar crystal existed in his previous life, but to work with it, you needed a license to transport dangerous goods. Outside the window, a loud explosion was heard, which caused dark smoke to blaze, and the birds flew away from the danger. Minato turned his head towards the window to see what had happened. Aimee managed to hide under the table, explaining that she was scared. The guy and Mina moved closer to the window to check the situation outside. He noted that the noise of the explosion came from the ruins, and the girl added that it was much further away, in the depths of the forest. They noticed a third-party noise waking up after the explosion. The guild members were running towards the exit. Mina sighed and said that they were too tired to deal with this new problem. They needed to gain strength, otherwise their help would be useless, and so all they could do now was write a purchase order, sell, and then eat and sleep. The others agreed with the girl's opinion. Minato himself said that he didn't want to get into trouble today. After completing the application, Mina proudly handed it to Minato to sign. The guy tried on the role of person responsible for the sale and agreed to be also an accompanying person, but at the same time asked for clarification of what the term main contributor means. The girl hurried to explain that this was the reason why they could get rewards from the guild and the country for great achievements. The guy also thought that it would be possible to do this only if he becomes a great adventurer, and noted that it is strange to be a large investor when you use a lot of magic. The girls couldn't help but burst out laughing, teasing him with his words and quoting his own expressions. Aimee noticed with a smile that Minato was really the type of person who aroused genuine interest. The guy himself, hearing this, tried to clarify what category they had assigned him to. Mina said they wouldn't have written a lie in the application. Aimee continued that this was because Minato was the biggest contributor, and the girls were the only ones who joined him afterwards. Mina added that it was because Minato used a little magic and asked him to be content with it, winking at him. But the young man stood silently, digesting all the information. He realized that this was some kind of special bonus and noted that the girls joined his company with extreme caution. Mina was already preparing to sell things. But before the three of them could leave the room, their attention was drawn to an impending sound that was slowly coming their way down the hall. An adult man with a small head wound entered the room and demanded a sage. Mina recognized the man, calling him Rice. She asked him what had happened, while Minato asked Aimee what kind of person it was. Aimee replied that Mr. Rice was the head of the Maya Guild, but the guy mentioned that he had met with the boss. Rice said they were in a state of emergency, and he urgently needed their help. He promised to give all the details along the way, asking the team to follow him. Minato knew that this was a serious matter, since the manager himself had come to see them. The guy asked the man if it was connected with the recent explosion. Mr. Rice's face only darkened in response, which the guy immediately noticed. The man asked the young man his rank and profession. Minato introduced himself as an E-rank mage, but Rice grimaced and sighed. He told the guy that he could stay in the room and if they needed help, he would let them know. Mina tried to protect Minato and his powers, but Rice did not let her finish, saying that in such a situation, the girl's own strength would be enough. However, the guy was not upset, but on the contrary was glad that he could rest. He mentally apologized to the girls, noting that it looked like it would leave them both out of consideration, but if they had special abilities or knowledge, they would be able to use it. Nodding to himself in conclusion, he noted that he was a beginner, and his rank was not high enough, and he had almost no energy left. Aimee got really angry and shouted loudly, telling Mr. Rice not to underestimate Minato, her anger sounding so sharp that the man himself cried out in sudden fright. She began to praise the guy and voice his achievements in their work together, saying that he had defeated many golems and a mechanical dragon with amazing magic. As he was about to continue his praise, Minato covered her mouth to stop her from saying such things and told the supervisor that he would wait for instructions in the room. The scene was awkward. Mina asked the guy if he wanted everything to remain a secret between them as well, to which she received a nod. After letting go of Aimee, Minato admitted to himself that he didn't want to stand out from the crowd. But Mina turned to the supervisor and asked him to let Minato accompany the girls, otherwise they would have refused to go after Rice. Minato, who was going to rest, did not expect such a request from the chaperone. But he had to go along with the team, not particularly happy with the outcome. He yawned and remembered that he hadn't slept in 24 hours. The leader, after recovering a little, asked the girls about their ranks and was surprised to learn that both of them belonged to the rank of V. Minato. Hearing this, respectfully noted that his companions are real veterans of the adventurer's life. When they came down, they were standing on the balcony and noticed that the rest of the guild members agreed with something, loudly and decisively exclaimed, not hiding their confidence. The dark-haired youth noticed that the scene was truly breathtaking. They noticed changes in each other's bodies, that someone was pumped up and someone was here to make money. They were prepared to fight 10 or even 20 monsters and confidently declared that they would destroy them with ease. Rice went down to the men, told them that a detailed report from the scouting team was due, and asked them to wait inside the building. Minia was a city where there were a lot of new adventurers. But even so, everyone gathered here was from the elite. One could tell just by looking at their physiques. The girls with the guy were smaller than their tall and large colleagues. They noticed Minia and addressed her as a seeker of wisdom. The girl asked them what had happened. One of them replied that a huge number of monsters were heading towards the city. And apparently these monsters had high ranks, so the veterans were called here. The adventurers began to split up into groups to join forces and show the monsters their full power. Veterans were in the process of developing a plan and suggested that the girls also join them because their help will also not interfere with this case. Aimee noticed her friend in the crowd and ran over to greet her. Mina tracked down Minato and found him standing against the wall. He decided not to participate in all of this, continuing to yawn widely. But then someone slammed on the door. A man entered the building, trying to catch his breath after a long run. Raising his gaze, he showed his colleagues the magic transmitter and informed them that a detailed report from the scouts had arrived. The Intelligence Corps reported that the approximate number of monsters is 6,000. Average rank in the area of sea veteran adventurers were shocked by such news. They heard the level of strength of the monsters. They thought that the scouts might have confused something, but the man with the transmitter in his hand said that the information was reliable. He added that the city's outer walls wouldn't be able to withstand the incoming monsters. A crowd of huge monsters that were taller than even the trees themselves was heading towards the Minia. There were also dragon-like monsters like pterodactyls, mutated animals, elephants and bulls with long horns, and a huge deer with a big eye on its forehead. But there were also the fiends themselves, like huge trolls with smoke rising from their mouths. When they heard that such strong monsters were coming towards them, they decided to run and save themselves. Minato was surprised by this reaction. The adventurers shouted at the number of monsters waiting for them, but they didn't dare face them head-on. In order to win, it took more people to defeat at least one. They opened the doors wide, but someone stood in front of them. It was Chief Rice, with the other adventurers behind him. He stopped the fleeing fighters and suggested that they first discuss a plan to defend the city. The adventurers, hearing his calm suggestion, were surprised and hurriedly expressed that it was necessary to evacuate as soon as possible, because the situation was becoming too dangerous. Rice, keeping calm but still worried about the current situation, explained that the monsters wouldn't arrive in the city until tomorrow morning, at dawn, to which one of the adventurers shouted that they only had 6 hours left to prepare. The man went on to say that as long as the monsters didn't become active, experienced travelers would be able to escape. But it reminded them of the ordinary residents of the city and the novice adventurers whose safety should be paramount. The situation was dire, as they didn't have any means to survive. The experienced adventurers looked at each other, then averted their eyes to the side, avoiding the direct gazes of the common people, as if hiding their inner doubt. He expressed his understanding that they were terrified and reminded them of their first rule: the traveler saves himself first. But still, he added that he wanted to share his request as the head of the Mania Guild branch. He and the adventurers behind him bowed before the huge number of travelers, asking them to protect them and the city itself. The travelers showed no resolve. They only looked at each other awkwardly as Rice assured them that there was a reward ahead of them and urged them to make the most of what was happening. One of the adventurers agreed with Chief Rice's words. Minato was watching from the sidelines. In his thoughts, he noted the strengths of the manager. The ability to negotiate did not consist in running away from difficulties, but in courtesy, foresight, and the ability to build a clear plan of action in advance. He wondered what he should do. The two men asked for directions, and Rice told Sierra to get out a map. The blonde girl obeyed, unfolding a wide canvas on the table. The first priority was to build a second line of defense and a moat behind the outer wall, where all the inhabitants of the city, including adventurers, would be sheltered. To get the materials for this, adventurers will have to cut down trees and dismantle several houses, and use the sand that remains after preparing the moats as an embankment between the walls. The girl advised them to make them as high as possible, and noted that the plots are divided into groups around the guild and a special training center, which is surrounded by walls on all sides. The difficulty was that at the slightest noise, the monsters would notice them and attack. Therefore, it was necessary to quickly build a wall and take cover, allowing the hordes to pass by before reinforcements arrived. She went on to explain that they would make enough space around the guild for ordinary people to enter. Voices began to chatter in the crowd, some doubting whether to start right now, others noting the size of the city and the difficulty of evacuating, claiming that the wall would not be able to withstand the onslaught of 6,000 rank sea monsters. Meanwhile, Minato noticed that the adventurers were standing still and doing nothing. Mina couldn't stand it any longer, and asked if they would be able to do it in such a short time. Minato noted that her words reflected the general concern. One of the adventurers, looking at the girl, remembered his granddaughter, who she looked so much like, and he even thought of buying her a sweet treat. Rice decided to be honest with the fighters and admitted that the probability of success is quite low, but said that apart from this plan, they have nothing. The dark-haired adventurer noticed that the branch manager was really capable of developing and implementing a plan even in such a limited time frame. According to Rice, this plan looks like the only way that can be implemented. and in order not to lose a single minute, the man announced the beginning of the operation. The residents who lived near the outer wall were ordered to move around and prepare the area, while the adventurers, along with carpenters, were to start digging a moat and erecting fortifications. In other words, you need to do everything that the heroes can do. Work raged inside the walls. Adventurers joined forces to cut down and carry trees, which they had to use to make a defense against monsters. A small-time old man among the crowd was handing out duties to the men, while the leader was talking to the adventurers inside. Suddenly, someone said that he was leaving. The guy tried to dissuade his colleagues, considering his decision too bold, but he admitted that there were A-rank monsters moving towards them and bluntly stated that they wouldn't be able to deal with them. He mounted his horse and rode away, telling the others to do the same. The boys were surprised by his cowardice, and Minato noticed that people were slowly but surely beginning to despair and lose hope. Suddenly, he was almost hit by a man with a cart who was in a hurry to move his things. Minato had only just noticed how many people had gathered in the city. Among the inhabitants were old people and women with babies. At this point, he was distracted by the innkeeper, who noted with concern that they were in serious trouble. Seeing the boy's drowsy state, the innkeeper gently laid him down in a hay to rest and handed him a piece of deep-fried meat to refresh his strength. Minato, who hadn't slept since yesterday, asked how much he should pay, but the innkeeper refused to pay, explaining that the food would still spoil during the evacuation, and admitted that, being crippled, he could not build, but would make an effort to the best of his ability. He didn't forget to give the boy a blanket, so that he could rest properly for the entire time and turn around, offering the adventurers food to build up their strength. Minato, on the other hand, stared at the piece of meat and apologized to Amy. After making a piece, it melted into the taste of well-done meat. He lay in the warmth on the soft hay with a blanket, and despite the situation, he felt safe. Lying on the hay, he watched the adventurers' intense work. The residents were already behind fences and had erected tents. Sierra was helping the newcomers settle in, gathering them to a common gathering point, and others were offering their own recovery magic if things got bad. Minato wondered if there was any way he could offer a helping hand. After eating the meat, he stared at the bare bone, holding it on top of him. His magic power was reduced by 20%, and nameless magic could only be used for 100 shots, and the knowledge of the past life was not enough to use it more effectively. He looked at the children playing and thought, if he was as much a strategy fan as they were, he might have come up with a clever plan, but from the past, he only remembered children's games. Hide-and-seek, tag, magic circle games, card games, and kin menu, which was once very popular. The children drew some doodles in the sand, having fun together. Kinmenu was a game of learning magic circles in an entertaining way and was a fight for positions. On each of the 10 cards, you had to draw a circle that the player remembers by heart. After setting a circle, it makes a flip, and the compatibility of attributes determines who wins and passes on. Minato noted that even the Ministry of Education recommended it for some reason, and they often played it in elementary school. There was also a scaring magic circle that was used when the enemy was in camp. But before that, the circle can prevent enemy forces from entering. Remembering the shape of the circle, he drew it in his notebook and something dawned on him. He recalled that as a child, he had not understood the true meaning of this phenomenon. Now, while cultivating the magic of the new world, he finally realized. It seemed to him that the shape resembled a magic circle inside Imi's sphere that attracted demons, and he realized that the circle repelled Yi. Minato wasn't sure if this magic would work, but with his notebook firmly in his hands, he decided to give it a shot. Minato crouched on the ground and cast a power-up magic. His body bounced up with a spring, and he quickly moved to the highest tower. Archers checking the situation outside the walls reported that the monster invasion had been stopped, which they couldn't immediately believe. If the demons notice people, they immediately attack, especially if they gather in a pack and attack the city. But for some reason, the monsters stopped moving. The mutated wolves near the huge troll stopped, but continued to growl. As they aimed their arrows, the archers noticed that the demons were moving, hoping that they would pass by. The short-haired girl opened the window, checked the north side, and covered her mouth with her hands, shocked by what she saw. People shouted their insistent questions at her and demanded that she give a clear answer, fearing that the demons had already made their way inside the city. They also anxiously asked what had happened to the yellow torches that were supposed to signal an invasion. But the girl, not understanding what was happening, could not explain anything. This response of the girl was sarcastically asked by a small old man, suggesting that her communicator was malfunctioning, but she cut off this speculation. She stated that the invasion had stopped, but the monsters continued to approach them. Already at the first light of dawn, as had been planned in advance, dark hordes of monsters surrounded the city walls from all sides. There were an incredible number of them, and his view horrified everyone who looked from the fortress towers. Excitement among the residents once again swept the streets of the city. People could not hide their fright. They were amazed that the monsters were able to build tactics and conduct a real siege, like trained warriors. Minato was sure that his demon-repelling magic was working, but looking at the confused people who did not understand what to do next and where to go made the guy himself experience anxiety. He suddenly thought that he might have made a serious mistake in his actions. His train of thought was suddenly cut short when a familiar female voice came from behind him, confident and firm, as if accusing. The voice made it clear that the guy was responsible for everything that was happening. Aimee and Mina couldn't hold back their tears as they hugged their comrade tightly from behind. Their unexpected appearance and such a touching display of emotion made Minato freeze in amazement. But he admitted that he was glad to be reunited with them. He asked Mina, who had previously expressed her hunch that she knew what the guy was doing. The girl replied that she was talking about the fact that for some reason the invasion stopped. Mina could see the guy's magic, which she immediately pointed out to the defense. The girls huddled together and started asking him if this magic really deters demons, noting that if they had such magic, they would be able to safely walk along the path. But the guy assured them that there was no need for this magic. He had heard that it was useless if you got too close to the demons, and it was also difficult to move once activated. In his mind, Minato noted that he knew all these nuances only because of the game. Turning to the bustling crowd, he guessed that he had used it correctly to make people so tense about the monster's behavior. But the girls began to praise his technique and say that it was good that he decided to do so. Mina explained that the double layer of the wall was completed, but not the top part of it, and they had to fight flying monsters. There are giants and orcs in their horde. There was also the possibility that they would be able to climb over the double wall. As it turned out, Aimee and Mina were discussing countermeasures against breaching the wall with Supervisor Rice. Minato asked if this process was really so expensive, but he didn't dare ask the girls directly. He only assumed in his head that the costs must have been enormous, and his guess seemed quite reasonable. The girls looked up at the monster-repelling magic and were glad to have Minato by their side. They smiled at him solicitously, not holding back their emotions. Mina asked where the guy got this technique from, since it was the first time she had heard about it, considering that the girl had read a lot of magic books. The young man replied curtly that it was a technique from Kinmanyu. The girls tilted their heads to the side, not really understanding what Minato was talking about. Guide to Dealing with Extreme Magical Disasters was the original title of the game, but it was later shortened to Kinmanyu. Minato was glad that he could remember the long and original name of the game. In his previous life, the demons were almost wiped out, so it was rare for him to fight them. But if there is some unlikely event where a demon attack does occur, then the citizens who are forbidden to use attacking magic will be defenseless against the monsters. It was in this situation that the state decided to tell about the basic measures in this situation, and they presented it in the form of a game. As a result, the long name was shortened, and now it is known as It Is. Minato admitted that this was extremely difficult to explain in words, but that was how all the information he found in the old book was stated. He had read it a long time ago and done everything described in it. Mina looked at him with a puzzled expression. Sighing, the girl suggested that they not go into too much detail and explain what was happening with magic of ancient origin, instead of trying to explain every detail. Minato also added that this magic should definitely work, which surprised Mina a lot. She noticed a huge flow of power and magical energy coming from the boy's body. It was hard for her to understand why Minato was so powerful, but even now, it was obvious that his magic was slowly beginning to wane and fade. In one of the houses, 4 wizards were gathered, sorting out their duties in the upcoming battle. An old man volunteered to represent the light. A young sorceress said she had water and air. A fair-haired boy with black locks grimly took over fire and water, and the smallest of them would be responsible for the earth if they didn't mind. Mina thanked Supervisor Rice for being able to gather all the wizards in such a large number in such a short time. Rice replied that this city was just a test, and only ancient magic could stop the demons. Lifting his head up, he couldn't help but burst into tears of joy. Taking a deep breath, the man spread his arms wide, glad that they had managed to trick the merciless monsters so cleverly and buy them some time. The wizards joined forces and spun around the magic circle that Minato had drawn beforehand, but it did not emit any effects, which greatly confused and even frightened the wizards, who expected an immediate result. They claimed that none of the elemental attributes had worked, and they began to doubt that this was really a magic circle. But the guy was confident in his circle, noting that this is the most ordinary circle that everyone can use. Mina suggested that it might be part of attribute magic, which was immediately noticed by the other wizards. Rice stopped the girl in a low whisper and asked her how she could have such a deep knowledge of advanced magical technology since she was only a sorceress of rank B. Mina replied that this was Minato's knowledge and she could not find any magical background. Perhaps it was a complex attribute, magic, meaning that multiple attributes were combined to activate at the same time. The girl didn't see it as anything special, but it felt very strange. The manager continued, explaining that such combinations are possible only with 15 combinations of 2 attributes, but Mina said it could be 3, and sometimes even more. Rice was surprised to see that there were too many gifted people in the city at the time. They asked Minato to continue working on this and decided to trust him, while staying as far away from the demons as possible. The guy asked them not to worry about it. He asked how long he would need to keep the demons at bay, which Rice thought about with a grimace. But he couldn't give an exact answer, as he hoped that the demons would get bored or hungry and leave, but he also noted that they were acting very strange. The man added that if Minato's magic was supposed to repel demons, then they should have passed by their city. But they continued to surround the city, not retreating, which made him feel creepy. Mina was interested in what the monsters wanted to achieve with this and took into account their possible behavioral features. Rice said that these monsters are a fairly common herd, and they received information before that no one was left behind. Minato caught his words and exchanged glances with Amy, waiting for her to explain. The girl explained that the demons that break out of the pack act alone, and if you plan to hunt a large group, you always start with those individuals who have fallen behind or lost their strength. They concluded that there were no laggards among the demon packs, which caused people to be surprised. Mina, noting that this is a huge flock, suggested that they may be led by someone from the outside. Rice and the sorceress both suggested that the red egg, the source of the strange demon packs, might have been responsible for all this. Minato asked Mina what exactly red egg meant. The girl explained that they were mysterious eggs that suddenly appeared in the woods and caused swarms of demons, but she could not say with complete certainty about their origin. With nervousness in her voice, she added that the demons born from the red egg, according to reliable data, are easily controlled, which makes them even more dangerous and unpredictable. Minato asked if they destroyed this egg, the demons would disappear. In response, he heard that they would indeed disperse. Then everyone decided unanimously that it was necessary to destroy the red egg at all costs. But Rice said it was an impossible idea, since the egg is protected by demons. To date, there are about 10 of them, but only once it was possible to destroy the egg. The last attempt involved 24 of the strongest travelers, but only 2 were able to destroy the egg, and in this case there are many more demons. A trembling fear of the impending danger gripped Mina, and her hands trembled involuntarily, as if realizing the full weight of the mission ahead. Minato noted the hopelessness of the situation, and admitted that even with 20% of his remaining magic, he couldn't help in any way. In other words, once Minato's magic runs out, the demons will easily break through the walls and bring chaos, death, and ultimate destruction to the city, leaving only ashes and darkness in their wake. Thus, the dark-haired boy realized that his magic, which repels demons, has a great responsibility for the safety of the city and its inhabitants. There was no way he could let the city down and just give up, but he asked his comrades to slow down and come up with a detailed plan of action if there was a chance of survival. Thinking about it, Rice said that the demons born from the red egg usually go a certain distance from the egg and suggested that travelers take advantage of this. But Minato decided to suggest his own plan, which interested the audience. After he explained his plan of action to them, they decided to accept and act on it, which surprised the guy himself, admitting that this was a bad idea. However, Rice tried to calm him down with a slight smile, saying that he was prepared for the possible negative reaction of the residents, but the guild might well recognize Minato's bold idea. He decided not to delay any longer and proceed with the implementation of the plan, to which the wizards and adventurers, supporting him, together and resolutely exclaimed, finding a new hope. Supervisor Rice ordered Sierra to escort Minato to a high-class room. The girl smiled, accepted the order, and agreed. But just as he was about to leave with the blonde companion, a man called out to him, stopping him in mid-stride. He shook the boy's hands and informed him that the fate of the city depended on his magic power and wished him luck in maintaining the barrier for the next 2 days. Minato smiled at Rice's words and made it clear with a curt nod that he understood perfectly, taking responsibility for the decision he made. Meanwhile, the demons were already much closer to the city walls, where the construction of additional defensive mechanisms and fortifications continued without stopping. The dark-haired adventurer sprawled on a luxurious sofa in the glittering room and sighed wearily. The shadows under his eyes stood out clearly. He was the only one who managed to push through such a risky idea. He was embarrassed that he was sent to such a rich room, feeling that he was not suitable for such a level of service. Along with him was also Sierra, who decided to open the windows to ventilate the room. Sierra turned to Minato with enthusiasm and warmly assured him that they would definitely succeed, and he could rely on his allies. But the guy barely managed to get a few words out of himself, already sinking into sleep right on the couch. All he could do at the moment was maintain the barrier and hold the magic. As he shifted on the couch, he couldn't help thinking that he'd forgotten something. Sierra came up behind the boy and looked down at him, saying that she had never seen a bear sleep before. Minato rubbed his face tiredly and explained to the girl that he hadn't slept a wink in 2 nights. Sierra was surprised to see that he had worked too hard and deserved a rest. She gently asked if he would like something to drink, offering him a soothing herbal tea. Smiling as she poured him some tea, she asked what would happen to the barrier if the adventurer fell asleep. The guy yawned and said that the barrier would probably lose its power. The girl did not understand in what sense he meant this, to which he explained that the barrier would simply disappear. But suddenly, a disturbing thought about the barrier crept into their minds at the same time, and this realization made both of them frown and become wary. This meant that Minato couldn't fall asleep until the mission was over, but there was only half a day left before the barrier ended. The dark-haired adventurer's plan was to completely abandon the city and leave it. At this time, the diggers were digging with all their might, loosening the heavy soil and collecting sand in bags. One of the diggers suddenly stopped and anxiously asked if the demons were directly below them, because he couldn't wait to finally get out of the stuffy dungeon. The man decided to go for a second run into the mine to finish the job as soon as possible and not be in mortal danger because of the monsters, while the wizards were sitting behind him. The plan required cutting a wide hole in the ground. Their main goal was to create an underground tunnel through which adventurers and residents can get out from under the oppressive influence of the mysterious red egg, and thus find hope for salvation. The diggers, along with the wizards, descended deep into the ground to make a passageway. Among them were only the most powerful and hardy diggers. One man, sweating profusely, took off his t-shirt, and the wizards offered to heal his wounds with their magic. As such, they were going to bypass the oncoming monsters, staying underground and fleeing for their lives, leaving the city behind. After drawing a magic circle, the wizards loudly shouted the excavation spell, and the magic activated. Those who possessed the earth attribute used it as they once did when building a defensive wall. The diggers stared in amazement at the wizard's magic. Since this is an independent magic, it didn't require Minato to activate it. One of the wizards added that if this magic was part of the one that drives away demons, it would be bad. One of the wizards took an interest in the magic circle Minato had given them, noting its unusual design and surprisingly low energy consumption compared to the usual similar spells. A satisfied smile touched his face, because he was enjoying the fact that it was the support mages who were now so heavily relied upon, and that without them, he wouldn't have been able to make any headway. Diggers and magicians joined forces to increasingly use large bags and storage magic, making the process of clearing the ground and removing the soil noticeably faster and more organized. Residents actively passed the filled bags to each other, trying not to delay the common work for a moment, because they understood that this could be their last chance for survival. When the ground is ready, all adventurers and residents will have to be taken out through the tunnels. Minato, on the other hand, needed to focus on reducing the cost of magic power to maintain her demon-repelling magic. He had drunk several cups of tea during this time. The young man could only wait for the tunnel to be completed. His eyes were gradually closing with fatigue, and sleep was falling like a heavy cloud, but at that moment, someone suddenly slapped him on the head, causing him to wake up abruptly. Sierra, holding a large light fan that she used to hit the boy on the head, asked the young man's condition. Minato thanked the girl for keeping him awake. In his previous life, he sometimes didn't sleep for 3 days, but he had never experienced such a depletion of magical powers, and he noted that he needed to take care of himself. After all, if he fell asleep, the demons would break into the city. He was well aware that he had a huge responsibility on his shoulders for everyone, but there was nothing he could do about his body, so he drank another cup of strong tea, hoping to cheer up a little and not fall asleep. Sierra insistently woke him up, jerking him sharply from side to side and slapping his head hard with her fan, and then quickly apologized for such actions. The young man calmly replied that he had asked her to hit him if he started to fall asleep, and asked her not to take it personally. In his mind's eye, he noted that the digging had already been going on for a day and a half, and he should have heard long ago that the tunnel was ready, but he didn't notice any movement. He began to worry that there might be problems digging, but suddenly he was brought back to reality by Sierra, who suggested that he immediately go and personally check the condition of the tunnel. She said she didn't want to hit him again. At this time, all the residents stopped working and sat down in turn as the demons approached the city. To escape through the underground tunnel that they were able to dig, Residents had to take a minimum and were warned that there were no good footholds in the tunnel. They were waiting for the evacuation signal before entering the tunnel. Minato had less than 10% of her magic power left, and she needed to start acting. Minato and Sierra noticed the Earth Mage sitting on the rocks, looking tired to the point of exhaustion. He insistently demanded to be let into the tunnel to provide assistance, but the adventurer firmly refused, urging him to at least get some rest. But the mage exhaled with difficulty that it was only a short time before the tunnel was fully opened and they had already reached the very base of the rock. Minato, catching snatches of their conversation, became interested in what was going on and decided to clarify what exactly they were talking about. The adventurer explained that there was solid rock between the loose earth and the tunnel itself. It blocked the way forward like a stone castle, and it was the reason why the exit was completely blocked. Because of this, the opening of the road was postponed. Minato knew that they didn't have time to dig another route right now. The wizard wanted to reassure him that he could handle it, but because of his dehydration, he started coughing, which scared his companions. Minato asked the adventurer to bring water, but he pointed to the side with an awkward face. To their misfortune, all the waterways were destroyed by the demons, and so there were no more sources of moisture left in the city. Drinking water in barrels that could have saved people has long since dried up, leaving residents without a single drop. Minato asked if it was possible to use magic to summon water because there was water supply magic. But the sorceress, who was hanging from an empty barrel, replied wearily that with their powers, they could only fill 2 wine barrels and they were already empty. The dark-haired man was surprised that they used so much water. Sierra said uneasily that in this situation, they should do something about it immediately. Minato, however, decided to intervene and asked the wizards if they could show him the magic circle that used to be used for water supply and storage. When he saw the circle drawn, he was right in his guess that it was ineffective. The sorceress explained that this magic is a precious knowledge that was changed by the great sage. He mentally reproached the creator for his negligence, and then suggested that the wizards distribute each of them sheets with a new, improved magic circle. When the wizards tried to use the new circle, they were surprised to see the barrels rapidly filling with water without losing their magic power. Residents enthusiastically watched this miracle. One man even hurried to scoop up a cup of water, but was immediately stopped by a member of the tunnel team, hitting him on the head and sternly stating that they were the first to get drunk. Meanwhile, the wizards continued tirelessly filling the barrels with water. Sierra asked if they could distribute magic without charging a fee for using it, since it was an incredible value, and Minato could be sent to prison for such a thing. The wizard, quenching his thirst, replied that for them the use and dissemination of magic was vital. Having solved the water problem, it was now necessary to solve the problem with the tunnel. Minato thought that if rock formations were not amenable to drilling magic, then it might be worth using his own attack magic against the barrier. Aloud, he suggested that Rias might have liked the idea. These words immediately caught the attention of the blonde-haired girl standing nearby. She smiled and said that Minato had changed a lot lately. The girl warmly added that he began to think not only about himself, but also sincerely cared about the safety of everyone around him. Minato resolutely went to the supervisor, convinced of the correctness of his plan. He thought that even if they only had 1/10 of their magic left, it would still be enough to create a cure for the demons. He called out loudly to the man, but the man just spun around and shouted back his utter incomprehension. The supervisor continued to speak intently into the transmitter, but suddenly his face contorted with a horrifying expression, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Residents, meanwhile, happily arrived, showing full barrels and rejoicing that they once again have water for the road. But as if he didn't notice the crowd around him, he shouted even louder. According to the communicator, water was pouring out of the tunnel ceiling in a powerful stream, and it could not be stopped. Upon hearing this news, the residents looked at each other in horror. Inside the tunnel, water was really pouring rapidly, filling the space, and the jet was only getting stronger by the moment. One of the adventurers who was right inside the tunnel confirmed this information. He said that it was underground water that broke through, and assessed the flow as extremely strong. According to him, if everything continues at this pace, then in an hour the tunnel will be completely flooded. The supervisor, however, still refused to believe, demanding that the joke stop. Minato immediately realized the deadly threat. If the water finally flooded the passage, everything would collapse, cutting off the tunnel and depriving them of their last escape route. He moved closer to the supervisor and asked about the condition of the tunnel near the exit. Rice was startled by the boy's sudden appearance behind him. At this point, Minia had already come to the transmitter, explaining that they couldn't create even the slightest crack. In the background, Aimi and another adventurer were trying their best to punch a hole to channel the water outwards and allow it to drain out safely. It was hard for Minato to admit that in this case, they had only one option left, to abandon the security measures. After all, initially they planned that after the tunnel is opened and the residents are evacuated, they will block the entrance. It was designed to scare away the demons. But the threat remained. The current situation threatened the tunnel with complete flooding, and to enter inside meant certain death. However, if the residents stayed in the city, then in less than 12 hours, the defenses would weaken, and the demons would inevitably rush in, sweeping everything in their path. He realized that there were no guarantees in this situation from the beginning. After some thought, he turned to Supervisor Rice. He demanded to put the residents in the tunnel, and he will block the entrance. The evacuation has begun. Residents were asked to enter the underground tunnel while remaining calm. They were looking at the land they would have to go under to escape. Minato stayed at the entrance, checking security. The mistake will cost the lives of all residents. Such pressure and great responsibility made his hands tremble involuntarily. Rice, who was standing back to back with Minato in the cramped underground passage, said that all the inhabitants were already inside the tunnel, after which the guy wasted no time in giving him a short but decisive signal to act. The man swung the axe and cut the rope. At that moment, clusters of massive tree beams and debris collapsed right onto the tunnel entrance, completely blocking the way. Minato, along with Rice, were trapped in a dungeon, and then the guy called on magic power, releasing a bright spell against evil spirits. But the demonic monsters did not retreat. They continued to advance and headed towards the walls of the deserted city. The protective barrier that had once shone over the fortress walls fell, and then the terrible demonic creatures, foaming and spittle in their mouths, rushed with primal roars to destroy the buildings and destroy the stone walls. By releasing the power of the barrier, Minato could now fully use his magic, and everything else depended on the hardness of the foundation. He crouched low to the ground, intending to use the enhanced magic that was known among wizards as a race against time. Rice stepped closer to the boy, placed a confident hand on his shoulder, and told him that he would be new to this difficult task. With that, he abruptly pushed the boy forward, allowing him to pick up a fast speed from the entire run-up. Minato charged forward, skirting the residents along the upper path like a wind cutting through the darkness. His movements were lightning fast. He pushed off from the walls without slowing down and, at the same time, managed not to interfere with the residents who tried to go behind. In this way, he attacked the monsters directly from the ground, as if bursting through their defenses. The monsters immediately felt the crushing blows, and the inhabitants, amazed by the sight, exclaimed with delight, supporting his morale. However, the path ahead was blocked again. The advanced inhabitants stumbled upon underground water, blocking the passage. But then Minato arrived. He opened his notebook and cast a spell that sent heavy layers of wood crashing down on the stream, forming a safe passage. Residents happily welcomed his decision. Minato, though drenched to the skin by the torrential torrents, continued on his way and did not allow himself to be left behind. As he rose and pushed off the wet walls, he left the villagers behind, moving faster and faster. Finally, a long-awaited light flashed in the distance, breaking through at the end of the underground tunnel. There, he noticed the familiar silhouettes of people who were exploring the area. Aimi and Mina both heard his footsteps and his breathing, and they both turned to look at the rapidly approaching boy. Stopping, he crouched down in front of the girls and informed them that reinforcements had arrived. Aimi was glad of her friend's grand entrance and hurried to hug him, but he stopped her, holding her forehead with his hand. Mina calmly approached the guy, rejoicing at his arrival. They pointed out to Minato the huge rock blocking the entrance to the tunnel, emphasizing its incredible size and massiveness, which did not allow even to think about easy destruction. Minato speculated that this was the only magic that could cause a strong vibration, but if he repeatedly pointed it at the rock, the tunnel might become entangled with glycine. Then they will have to gather all their strength to deliver the final crushing blow. But they didn't have enough magic for such a decisive step, and then the guy decided to take a chance, try and bring the idea to the end. Stretching out, he pointed his hand at the adventurers. They just looked at each other, surprised by his bold performance. Minato said that if they broke the stone, they would be able to pass through, and then he sat down on the ground, preparing to use magic. One of the men was horrified by his actions, and loudly reminded that they were almost completely underwater. But Mina firmly demanded not to interfere with the guy, to concentrate and finish what he started, believing in his strength to the end. Minato was perfecting the bomb cannon from the offensive magic handbook, taking it to the ultimate level. His eyes were bleary with sleep, and his head ached with pain, but he stubbornly continued to draw a circle. Each line required extreme precision to eliminate the slightest leakage of magic. After finishing the magic circle, he got to his feet and gave one last hope that the plan would work. With his index finger, the guy touched the circle he'd drawn, pointing it up. The others held their breath, waiting for the outcome. At the same time, a powerful explosive cannon shot out from his finger, shooting straight up into the heart of the rock, ready to break through its thickness. After piercing through the solid ground, the magic attack shattered the rock layers, and everything around them flashed with sparks, leaving a deep trail in the soil. The cannon shot outwards, breaking through the barrier. When she broke the surface, she cleared a path, but at the same time, rocks crashed down from above, falling directly towards the weakened guy. Mina instantly raised a protective barrier, covering herself and her companions with it, saving them from the rock avalanche. But the falling debris had already grazed Minato, and he fell heavily to the ground, unable to get up. The adventurers immediately arrived, one of them looking up in shock at the light coming out of the broken rock. Now, through the crack, he could see the surface and the long-awaited exit from the dungeon. Minato, barely able to open his closed eyes, realized that he had managed to break the barrier, and now he could rest. The adventurers were rejoicing at his feet, and the horse's elongated head was already showing through the opening. At first, they were afraid, thinking that it was a demon, but when they saw an unknown person in dark clothes, they thought that it was a person. The light obscured his appearance. The girls were rushing around Minato, worrying about his condition and trying to bring him back to consciousness, but he couldn't move anymore and let go of his hand. The stranger turned out to be a girl whose face was hidden under a mask. She silently watched from the top down, studying the adventurers with a cold and distant gaze. After a while, Minato slowly opened his eyes and was surprised to see that he was being hugged on both sides by his devoted companions, who had fallen asleep next to him from fatigue and anxiety. A woman's voice came from the side as the stranger noticed that the guy had finally come to his senses. She said the girls were so worried about him that they fell asleep while she was with them. The stranger looked at the guy with a soft smile and was glad that he had woken up. She laughed, saying she was glad he hadn't hurt himself while he was sleeping. The guy only briefly replied that he could sleep without moving and sat down on the bed. The girl suddenly burst into a peal of laughter, genuinely surprised that two seekers of wisdom who thought he was long dead should have burst into bitter tears until she found them in such a strange and almost ridiculous position. He remembered that she was the only one who went to rescue them. The girl apologized for putting out all the information at once and decided to start by introducing the Maya's Guild guest house. Holding out her hand for a firm handshake, she introduced herself as Cardiff and identified herself as the head of the local guild branch. Minato also asked if the girl herself came to rescue them, because the city of Mayas has already sent a rescue operation to neighboring cities. Minato shook the commander's hand. Cardiff explained that she had heard from the head of one of Minia's branches that the city was at the center of a monster outbreak, and Minato was the first person in history to keep the monsters at bay. She handed him a piece of paper, asking for his autograph. Minato was surprised that he had become so popular in such a short time. After reading the paper, he realized that it was a reward receipt for a special overgrowth. Cardiff hurried to explain that the Adventurers Guild would pay a small reward to anyone who contributed to the evacuation of the stricken, and they had determined the amount of contribution for the guy. The contribution was large, 30 million sig for the help. She handed the box to the guy, but he managed to hold on to the heavy weight. She assured him that they could ask for a redetermination, noting that there was a chance to increase the reward, but Minato declined the offer. Deciding not to disturb the young man, she said goodbye to him and left the room, not forgetting to ask him to send greetings to the girls. Minato breathed a sigh of relief and looked at the sleeping companions. They had slept together most of the night and he didn't want to wake them up, but would just quietly go out and see what was going on in the city. But he was immediately stopped by Mina and Amy, who grabbed his pants. Seeing that they were awake, he wondered why they had fallen asleep next to him. Amy said that Cardiff was being nice and gentle with them, while Mina, on the contrary, stressed that this only began to annoy her. The girl had already shown them around the house, and Amy noted that they came here on a regular basis. Meanwhile, Cardiff walked the halls of the mansion, thinking that she had met the legendary Minato that everyone was talking about. She estimated that the scale of the outbreak is unusually large, and there is a possibility that some creatures were behind it. As she put on her dark cloak, she was worried that things might not end up the way they wanted. The heroes went outside on a noisy and busy street. Mina, looking around, told her companions that Maya's was considered the main and most important city in the entire area. The city was a real transport hub, because almost all the routes ran through this city. There was a bustling trade here, with shoppers coming to the shops, blacksmiths working expertly, and artisans and adventurers talking animatedly. The outer walls of the city looked truly magnificent. Even if as many as 6,000 demons suddenly attacked, the residents would remain relatively safe for a long time to come. Minato, looking around, noticed the structures above and asked a question about them. Mina explained that they were probably building observation towers to monitor the movement of demons in the area. Minato noted the amazing speed of construction, to which the girl replied that the city is large and the best artisans and high-level seekers work here. Aimee pointed to a large square where tents were opening up right in front of her eyes. The hotel was already sorely short of places, so all the refugees from the destroyed city gathered here in the open space. The refugees began to celebrate noisily in honor of their miraculous escape. They were talking animatedly, sharing their fears about standing shoulder-deep in water, enjoying their future money, and some of them were enjoying their meal as they greedily devoured the delicious fried chicken. Minato smiled at the scene and was glad that everyone was safe. News reached him that he was being moved while he was sleeping. Aimee replied that it was, adding that it was a battle to carry him away. She offered to go to the survivors and was sure that everyone would want to thank the guy, but he refused to do so, not wanting to exalt himself so highly. However, he already had other plans. The heroes sat down at one of the small tables in a cozy cafe and ordered a pie. He was asked if it was possible that the large capsule found in the ruins was the true essence of the red egg. Minato thought about the artificial magical intelligence. Mina took a careful bite of the pie and retorted that she hadn't noticed any magic in the huge capsule. Aimee, meanwhile, was eating mouthfuls, and the guy noticed that a demon outbreak required a strong source of magic, which wasn't there. The girl took out a map and placed it directly on the table, agreeing with Minato's concerns. This card was given to her by Rice. It marked the site of the explosion, presumably near the red egg, not far from the ruins found. He wondered why he hadn't noticed all these warning signs before, because then they might have taken countermeasures. Mina agreed and added that the demon web among the inhabitants doesn't mean the end, suggesting that the worst is yet to come. Looking at the refugees who were sitting outside their tents with their children and rejoicing at their rescue, they realized that nothing will end until the people of Mania return to their homeland. Minato guessed that they would either have to fight 6,000 demons or directly hit the red egg. Mina thought about it and said that if they gathered a large group, they would be able to defeat him, although there would be a lot of fuss. However, she added that this is only a backup plan, because there was nothing better than if the demons disappeared naturally and inexplicably, without the intervention of heroes and large-scale battles. After finishing her meal, Aimee abruptly got up from her chair and offered her theory. If the egg was really there, then it might be under a huge capsule. She mentioned a strange smell in the area, which surprised her companions that she hadn't said anything earlier. But she shrugged off the questions, explaining that her magic was at its limit, and she didn't want to put the team in any more danger like a mechanical dragon. Minato smiled awkwardly, agreeing with the girl and thinking that her intuition was often correct, so the location of the egg might not be far away. Minato hoped that in the future they would be able to use her delicate nose as a kind of sensor to search for a mysterious egg that could be hiding underground or inside strange structures. He asked the girl to explain exactly what the red egg smelled like, but the girl folded her hands and explained briefly that it smelled exactly like where they were now. But she was never able to explain her remark in detail, because her attention was suddenly distracted by a strong and piercing cold, which made it difficult to focus on her own thoughts and impressions. She picked up her companion's cloak and carefully crawled under it, trying to keep warm from the freezing cold, which involuntarily confused Mina. Minato got up from his chair and asked the girl if she had a sudden chill because she was so cold, but Aimee calmly replied that it wasn't the cold at all, but the sense of horror of the place. He then asked if there were any demons nearby, but Mina firmly rejected the idea, looking around carefully herself. However, after her words, the guy still became alert and anxiously peered at the surrounding area. He recalled what Sierra had said about her lack of confidence in how water and sticky magic spread, and assumed that they might indeed have been watched by hidden and unseen observers. Suddenly, he was able to understand the girl's feelings and felt the gazes of others on him, which made him look around anxiously, trying to distinguish a possible and hidden pursuer among the usual crowd. However, he could not discern anyone suspicious or unusual among the townspeople, who continued to go about their usual business and did not pay any attention to the travelers. Minato thought that it might have been just his imagination, since Aimee's senses usually only worked around ruins, and he doubted that a human could have been watching them. But there was a young man in uniform lurking behind the wall, clutching a magic transmitter and carefully watching their movements. Mina informed the guy that she had already contacted the guild, telling them that the city was quiet and calm, and now they were only collecting information about the pressure. But Minato ironically asked if Aimee would finally come out of someone else's raincoat, to which Mina replied doubtfully, saying that she felt like a dome in which her friend had taken refuge. She continued to cling to her, unwilling to pull away, and Mina begged her to stop. Minato, watching this scene, realized that he didn't have to worry about either of them at all. He suggested that the girls return to the guild's guest house. The bathroom was stuffy and cramped, and there was a barrel of hot water filled with used and soapy soap. Mina and Aimee decided to take a hot bath to get rid of the unpleasant feeling that Aimee voiced. Mina asked the girl if she was feeling better and if she was able to relax, but Amy still felt cold. Minato was sitting on the floor outside the door. The girls asked him if he was still there, to which he responded by giving them his voice and confirmation. They didn't want the guy to leave and kept talking to him, trying to lighten the atmosphere, even asking him to play a musical instrument. But Minato persistently refused, feeling like he was acting like he was putting the kids to bed. Amy pouted and sank deeper into the water. Minato knew that something was bothering the girl and she wanted to distract herself. Picking up his notebook, he considered using magic to cheer the girl up, but gave up on the idea. He still wasn't sure if he was ready to use magic and decided to improve the magic for efficiency first. But he kept looking for alternatives, opening the magic vault. The bathroom door opened after a while. Amy was the first out of the bathroom to hug him, even though her hair was still wet. Mina peeked out of the door, noticing that the girl was more comfortable with Minato. Sitting down next to the boy and the girl, who was already comfortably ensconced with her head on his lap, Mina noticed the girl's resemblance to a lazy cat, serenely basking in the sun. Minato agreed in return. With a cautious expression, he asked the girl why Amy looked so worried, and wondered if it might have something to do with the huge horde of 6,000 creatures in Minia heading towards them. But Mina resolutely dismissed this disturbing notion, saying that demons born from a red egg simply aren't capable of performing such military maneuvers. However, the guy offered to take this version, at least for consideration. Lowering the tone of her voice, the girl decided to share with him her thoughts about this. She directly said that the entire territory of the city could be destroyed if the demons got to them. Myas was considered the largest and most important city in the region, being the most important logistics center. If he was surrounded by demons, all vital trade and military routes would be immediately blocked, and nearby towns and villages would fall in his wake. Minato caught her train of thought and clarified the extent of the alleged damage, noting that its catastrophic consequences could not even be compared to what happened in Minia, because it was a much larger area. From the realization of all this, the guy himself became anxious and uneasy. Mina, noticing his concern, tried to console him with words, but he noted that even before the demon attack, Aimi had been feeling unwell. Gently placing his hand on her head, he used the dry magic to make her hair dry faster and thought uneasily about her current condition, assuming that what was happening could lead to something much more serious. Mina told him that they had no choice but to wait for news, pointing to the magic transmitter that was supposed to transmit the long-awaited information from the guild about further actions and decisions. But suddenly, a sharp voice came out of the communicator, which the girl did not expect, and, startled, she dropped the transmitter on the floor. Minato caught the device in time, and voices kept coming from it, demanding answers. The heroes stopped in front of the massive entrance to the Maya's guild hall. They were called here in advance, but there were many adventurers inside. Minato asked why everyone was gathered and what was waiting for them. He held Aimi on his back, saying that she could stay in the room to rest. The girl firmly replied that she would be better off with him. The crowd of searchers were loudly discussing the rumor that someone had seen something suspicious on the observation deck. There were men on duty at the observation deck, keeping an eye on the surroundings outside the city walls, and it was they who noticed that a huge number of demons had suddenly emerged from the area of the recent explosion. But the demons remained motionless, making no attempt to move, which looked like an ominous respite and hinted at a new type of outbreak. The men argued about the number but decided that the alarm might be false. However, one of the adventurers suddenly announced loudly that the number of monsters had reached 40,000. Minato was horrified by this news, noting that it was 6 times more than what they had already encountered in Minia. He clearly understood that something really bad was going on, but such numbers seemed unrealistic. After calling Aimi, the guy asked her directly if there was a real reason for her alarming chills and anxiety. Hearing the question, the girl squeezed her eyes shut and focused sharply, which confused Mina. The crowds of adventurers were greatly alarmed by the spreading rumors and were now waiting for the official announcement of the reason for the gathering. If the 40,000-strong monsters were true, the city's residents would simply panic. Finally, the guards came out on the balcony, lined up strictly according to the order. The army was drawn up in a clear and even formation. Their sudden appearance attracted the attention of the crowd, and people exclaimed that it was the Cardiff Squad. Mina confirmed that they were a personal guard, made up of loyal men and women who would die for their commander. At the signal, the warriors struck their long iron spears on the ground in unison, as if to salute the commander who stood before them in all his sternness and majesty. The adventurers were joined by the head of the Mayasa Cardiff Guild branch, who enthusiastically expressed her joy to see all those present and feel their readiness for business. She announced loudly that they had heard news of 40,000 new demons born from the red egg, and now a new outbreak was rapidly approaching their city. Residents, convinced of the correctness of their fears, only looked at each other anxiously. Cardiff had informed everyone that within 24 hours, Mias would be in the middle of what was coming, and there was very little time to prepare. But then she immediately suggested a way out of this seemingly hopeless situation: to form combat units, spreading their arms wide to the sides. With an enthusiastic exclamation, she raised one hand in the air in a show of determination and stated that their main objective would be to attack the location of the red egg. Then she abruptly lowered her hand and clenched her fingers into a fist, adding forcefully that they would destroy the cursed egg, leaving it with no chance of rebirth. Putting one foot on the railing and leaning lightly on it, Cardiff admitted that the number of demons far exceeded their strength, but assured them that if they managed to break through, they would definitely win. The adventurers peppered the commander with questions, doubting the plan and finding it impossible to fight their way through the hordes of demons to the egg. But the girl confidently declared that this is much better than being doomed to defend the city from the influx of monsters. She announced that she took full responsibility for the consequences of this dangerous decision and, standing firmly on the fence, finally confirmed her choice. At the head of the entire column, as she said, she will personally stand. Minato smiled at her determination and admired the fact that she was planning to destroy the egg herself. Cardiff said that anyone willing to participate in the destruction of the red egg should meet at the same place at noon the next day, and then concluded the meeting. She walked back into the mansion with a loyal army accompanying her. The residents who remained in the square were amazed by her speech and started shouting her name loudly. The heroes were surrounded by an enthusiastic crowd who continued to support and praise Cardiff as if there was salvation and hope for the future in her words. Minato noted the girl's excessive charisma and her presence of an army whose morale was strikingly different from Minihir's. Mina called out to him in a low whisper, and he agreed to move away from the noise and talk. They retreated to a quiet, deserted alley, and the guy asked for their opinion on the commander's plan announced earlier. Mina noticed that 6,000 people against 40,000 demons wouldn't be able to survive, as the hordes of monsters would attack from the side and crush them instantly. Aimee, hearing these words, agreed with her thoughts. Cradling the staff closer to her, she guessed that Cardiff might have calculated all this long ago and decided on a similar course of action in advance. After all, her army will leave the city 3 hours before the demons arrive, and it seems that they hope that the monsters will disappear in time to avoid unnecessary deaths. Aimee, sitting on the wooden box and hugging her knees tightly to her chest, said quietly that she didn't want to allow an even worse outcome. Minato admitted that he had thought about such a plan himself and suggested that they go in search of the egg before Cardiff and his army do it. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. Mina replied that only they would be able to find out the exact location of the egg before departure, and this would significantly reduce the number of victims. They were surprised that the three of them had decided to go together, but they had no doubt that the guy had a plan. Minato knew that if he showed his improved magic to anyone else, it might lead to trouble, and he wasn't going to share his abilities with anyone. He explained to the girls that no one should know about their plan, as they were the only ones who would risk going with him. Minato was already a public figure, wielding 5 types of magic and ancient spells. Aimee and Mina hadn't expected him to be so secretive and cautious, and they were surprised at the change in his personality. The very next day, the heroes went to look for the red egg and went down to the dungeon, where Aimee actively sniffed at any traces that could lead them to the goal. She called her companions, saying that she could smell the location of the egg and pointed with her hand, explaining that the smell was thicker there, but it scared her more. Mina made sure that the travelers were heading in the right direction. She knew that the egg might be located in roughly the same place where they had previously found the ruins. Aimee herself had already guessed the possible location of the egg, and with each new step, her guess seemed to be true, which strengthened the team's confidence. At the moment, the heroes were engaged in laying the shortest path to the red egg of doom. Minato took advantage of the improved excavation magic to continue digging in the right direction. A vast magic circle opened up in front of them, continuously excavating the path. The guy, thinking about all the effort invested in the work of the mine, finalized this spell, saving himself the grueling waste of time on freeing the soil. Assuming that the egg was actually buried directly under the ancient ruins, they were able to advance about 2/3 of the way. Everything was going well in the excavation, and now they could rely not on Mina's skills, but only on Aimee's sharpened senses. Mina picked up 2 magic communicators and handed one to the girl, saying that she was returning to the surface. She asked Aimee to contact her in case of danger. The girl was glad, because she was rarely trusted with such valuable tools. Before leaving, the girl called Minato to give him a gift, which interested the young man since it was the first time she gave him something. Then, after opening her own magic vault, Mina took out only half of a piece and handed it to him, saying that in case of trouble, this item might be useful, and really useful. The guy, of course, expected to receive a small gift from the girl, but he did not expect to see a pickaxe. After picking up the tool, he was more interested in which side to use it correctly than confused Mina with his ignorance. She decided to return the gift, thinking that he might not need the pickaxe, since his mana was already fully restored, and noted that his recovery rate was quite strange. Minato, on the other hand, wanted to take the tool, explaining that it would be useful to him and he would like to save his strength. The girl decided not to argue with the guy and handed him a pickaxe, the weight of which he could not hold, and immediately dropped to the ground. Aimi waved to her friend and said goodbye. Mina, in turn, returned the gesture. The girl turned to the guy and put on a cat-eared headband, as if ready for work. She confidently stated that they would be able to outrun the commander and find the egg. Minato was surprised when a simple race turned out to be almost a battle in her mouth. Embarrassed, Aimi admitted that she felt better when she finally understood the source of her worries. Minato was surprised that just knowing why she was worried could calm her down. She confirmed it, and he asked if she really understood their current situation. After all, everything will become much more serious when they finally find the egg. In his mind, he even began to wonder if they were strong enough to get to this point. Digging here allows them to ignore the 40,000 monsters standing outside, but they won't be able to avoid the upcoming battles with those defending the egg. Amy, on the other hand, clenched her fingers into a fist, was sure that Mina's return to the surface might mean calling in reinforcements and that they would be able to defeat the enemy. She added that the girl was excellent at negotiations and was confident that she would return with a crowd of adventurers willing to help, despite Minato's hidden and suspicious identity. He remembered what she had said about his character, noting that if she did, she should stay away from him, and admitting that it would be great if Mina could bring at least 30 people. Aimi reminded him that she was no longer afraid but willing to fight. The guy agreed in his heart and continued to dig the ground, while the girl animatedly demonstrated her fighting techniques and skills. Suddenly, the magic communicator vibrated. The girl picked it up after answering an incoming call, but without noticing, she held the device upside down, which Minato immediately noticed and chuckled slightly. Mina informed them that she had reached the exit of the tunnel, but Amy couldn't hear her words due to the incorrect position of the magic device, and the connection was just a blank noise to her. Then Minato asked for the communicator and immediately answered Mina. The girl was surprised to see the device in his hands, because only recently she gave it to Aimee. But she continued to talk about her observations. There's no movement from the watchtower, but it didn't seem like the speed of the monster's advance had changed. She didn't understand why the monsters were moving so much slower than the ones in Mania. While Amy continued to talk to her friends from the dungeon, two people, one of whom was a mage, were secretly watching her back. The young man warned that as soon as the Mina moves, the magician must destroy the whole. But Mina herself instantly sensed the presence of a powerful sorcerer nearby. She approached the hiding spies, and at first thought that it was reinforcements that had arrived, which made her unable to contain her joy. But the strangers, seeing her, immediately retreated and went in an unknown direction. The girl was slightly offended by this behavior, and her voice became noticeably quieter. Minato asked why there was such a sudden change, but Aimee refused to answer. Instead of explaining, she said that her mana was recovering slower than his, but she would do her best to fix it. Minato could no longer continue digging, as the magic circle had stopped working. After checking the cause, they encountered solid rock. His spell was too weak, and he didn't dare use the explosive cannon, which would have been inevitable. Aimee, with a sly smile, reminded him of Mina's gift. Minato immediately noticed the pickaxe hanging on his back, as if waiting for this exact moment. As he picked up the tool, he assessed its weight and power, assuming that it was a well-known and respected item in their world. Aimee's eyes lit up with anticipation as she enjoyed watching Minato use an ordinary item instead of magic. After accepting the gift from his companion, he raised the pickaxe above him, but couldn't keep his balance. The weight of the instrument was too heavy, and he almost staggered. The scene turned out to be awkward. The guy did not know how to wield a pickaxe, clumsily swung and froze in a strange position. When he straightened up, he was visibly shaking, realizing that this tool couldn't just be picked up and used easily right away. The girl's face suddenly turned red, and in a trembling voice, she offered to help the guy. But the guy, slightly embarrassed by what had happened, refused to help. Aimee put her hands over her mouth and shivered, trying not to laugh. He decided to use magic to improve the material. When he held the pickaxe so high above his head, he couldn't take aim, so he started hitting the rocks from the side. There was an outbreak, but the travelers have not yet seen any result. He swung the pick again with an effort, and the rocks suddenly began to sag under the weight, causing the young man to lose his balance and stumble down a dangerous cliff. A dark cave opened up in front of his eyes, with a muffled hum coming from the depths. causing his eyes to widen in genuine surprise. Aimi saved him from falling all the way down, grabbing the edge of his raincoat just in time. He asked the girl to let him go, explaining that this would save them time, but she refused, pulled him back, and warned him about the poisonous fumes. Minato asked how well Aimi knew about caves. It turned out that she had visited several during the ruins, but admitted that Mina knew much more about caves. Aimi remembered that canaries can detect poison and was about to go get one with Mina, but Minato stopped her, reminding her about the magic communicator. However, the girl did not have time to hear. Her trail had already disappeared behind the speed. Minato took out his notebook from his bag, where he quickly began to draw a magic circle suitable for this situation. After finishing the drawing, he transferred it to his hands and cast a spell called Poison Detection. By spraying magic all over the cave, she helped reveal the location of the poisonous pores, which, fortunately for the hero, were not nearby. He didn't wait for his girlfriend to return and decided to go down on his own to explore the cave. Minato estimated that the floor looked quite safe there and decided to contact Mina after he had taken a closer look. After some time, he was able to contact the sorceress and shared with her the news that during the excavation he came across a cave. Mina was surprised and warned him not to rush into action without equipment, and he managed to warn her that Aimi was already on her way. However, suddenly, a strange and incomprehensible explosion was heard right behind him, thundering very close. The explosion was so powerful that its flash and roar were noticeable even in the depths of the forest. Soon, thick black smoke rose into the air, and the young man himself was momentarily stunned, disoriented. Minato was still holding the communicator, which was filled with the worried voice of the girl who was worried about his condition. This explosion alarmed him even more, and he speculated that the tremors might have been related to the red egg of doom. When he came to, he said he was alive and asked about Aimi. But Amy hadn't reached the main road yet. She replied that she was already on her way to the tunnel and asked about the origin of the tremors. Hearing that they were coming from the depths of the tunnel, the girl was very surprised and even frightened. Soon, Aimi had to run as fast as she could, rocks falling from the explosion raining down on her. The girl was rushing to the exit when she suddenly noticed that Mina was waiting for her ahead, sticking her head out from behind the hole. Amy ran and leapt straight to her friend, hugging her tightly. The two of them landed on the ground, and after catching their breath, they immediately turned towards the tunnel where the booming sounds were coming from. Now the exit was completely blocked by rocks, which made rescuing Minato much more difficult. Mina informed him of this and assured him that Aimi was safe with her now. The guy smiled, glad that the girls were safe, and didn't worry about himself. Minato didn't have much time to dig his way back in. Amy was worried about his situation, and Mina was looking for a way out. They noticed a red flag waving on the watchtower, signaling that there were monsters nearby, despite their usually slow pace. It soon became clear that the mutated wolves were beginning to run towards Maias. Minato suspected that their sudden speed and the recent explosion might be related. The commander quickly responded to the new threat and, without waiting for the appointed time, ordered the operation to begin earlier than planned. The watchtowers continued to wave the red flag, and the girls watched intently for the warning signal, knowing that danger was now very close. The army had already formed up in battle formation and was preparing to leave. They were joined by volunteer adventurers who agreed to help. Aimi and Mina informed Minato that they were staying in the city to fight and asked him to deal with the egg. He also wished them caution. After cutting off contact with the girls, Minato thought about their words about the egg again. Realizing that he would have to find it himself, he used healing magic on himself, healing the wounds and abrasions left by the explosion. The explosion was too powerful to be accidental, and the force of it was enough to blow a person apart. This meant that the young man was already very close to the anomaly and therefore to the egg itself. Standing up, he continued his search. He was heading in an unknown direction where only endless darkness awaited him ahead. There was no way out, and he didn't want to be trapped underground and survive only to return to the surface and find the city completely destroyed. Minato carefully looked around and illuminated the dark space with his magic. It was rumored that monsters were swarming around the red egg of doom. Looking down, he saw the roots of the earth seem to stretch out and lead him to a certain place in the deep cave. Following these roots, he soon found himself facing a frightening picture. He saw the monsters that had just been born after the explosion, including mutated rats, distorted wolves, and other disfigured animals that inspired fear just by looking at them. The space ahead opened up in a fan-shaped shape, covering a radius of about 100 meters. The whole place was filled with a suspicious, thick fog. Apparently, it was this fog that was the source of the monster's birth, and he was tormented by the question of whether he had already reached the location of the red egg. He soon noticed that the mist was flowing out of a deep iron hole, and he guessed that the egg might be inside it. Having made conclusions for himself, he began preparing to break through and get to his cherished goal. In order to realize his plan, he had to overcome a whole cluster of newly born monsters. After opening the magic vault, he summoned control magic and summoned many daggers that obediently rose into the air, then pointed them directly towards the enemies. He engraved the magic circle of the control spell on the 100 monster daggers he obtained during the first quest, and to stop the daggers from functioning, he used lightning magic. Such tricks allowed the guy to partially control the weapon remotely, directing its actions and attacks. However, today he was going to use them in a completely different way, because he didn't know how much strength it would take, and he found it pointless to get involved in a bloody battle in vain. He carefully stood on the blade of the dagger, trying to straighten out. Thanks to the floating spell placed on the daggers beforehand, they became an unstable support. Minato carefully shifted from one floating dagger to the next, careful not to lose his balance and fall down into the swarming monsters and attract their attention. It took about 150 steps to cover 100 meters, so he carried the knives from behind his back to the front so that he had enough for the remaining distance. But one of the monsters noticed him and immediately attacked the young man, opening its mouth. When the mutated rat suddenly charged at him, Minato managed to defend himself. Using his blades, he aimed them at the monster's body, and the daggers pierced the flesh from both sides, paralyzing the animal and stopping its further movement. But now his presence was also detected by the wolves. A pack of monsters rushed at the guy, and he, realizing the danger, decided not to engage in battle, but to run past, jumping over the daggers that made his way. However, as he fought back, he increasingly lost his footing. He needed to make it to the hole before the monster daggers ran out. Picking up speed and gathering his strength, Minato made a sharp jump and flew straight into the iron hole, escaping from the attacking monsters. In this narrow and confined space, he finally had an opportunity to counterattack. He snatched a pickaxe from the vault and prepared to face the approaching demons. But when they reached the opening, they couldn't get in, staggering backwards every time, as if there was an invisible barrier blocking their way. Looking back, the boy noticed that he was in a completely snow-white room where there was not a single detail or object, only emptiness and silence surrounding him from all sides. As he continued to look around, he realized that the room wasn't that big. It didn't extend more than 20 meters from one end to the other. Judging from the material of the walls, it was part of an ancient ruin hidden deep underground. Minato stopped and froze in place as his long-awaited goal finally appeared right in front of him. However, he was greatly confused by the unusual appearance of the egg, which he did not expect to see at all. All the stories and legends claimed that the egg of doom should be red in color. But now, right in front of him, it was a blue hue, resting on a mechanical device and glowing softly in the snow-white room. After thinking for a while, he opened the Magic Circle notebook and decided to use it. In order not to waste too much time, he was going to quickly destroy the egg and use magic. But all of a sudden, small cubes formed on top and connected to each other. A huge, frighteningly massive dark cube suddenly appeared above Minato and the mysterious egg, and this unexpected appearance immediately distracted the boy's attention from his concentration and intended action. It took him a moment to realize exactly what he was seeing, and he wondered why such a strange object had appeared in the middle of the room. The massive structure completely blocked the egg's view, and so the guy tried in every possible way to break through the cube, or at least bypass it. Minato took a step to the side, trying to find a point of aim at the egg through the cube's shadow as it blocked his attacking spells. But at that moment, a booming, strange sound came from inside. A mechanical voice suddenly cut through the sound, coming directly from the cube, and he began to assess the threat level. It was so unexpected that it surprised Minato. He was keenly interested in the possibility of entering into a dialogue with this mysterious object, and he was ready to bombard it with questions. But before starting, the guy extinguished the magic and politely introduced himself. The cube clearly pronounced Minato's name, while describing him as a transcendent object of rank S. The guy did not understand the essence of this classification, when suddenly the cube began to separate small cubes from itself. In a matter of moments, the cube transformed into a semblance of an animal and, looming menacingly over the egg, began to protect it. Minato realized that this machine was playing the role of egg protector, and it struck him that it had turned into either a guard dog or a mighty bull. But obviously, the cube wasn't going to listen to him. On the surface of the two lamps of the cube, magnetic waves appeared, which began to fluctuate violently, and after that, a destructive incineration was activated. The machine sent a lightning bolt of electricity at Minato, but the guy managed to create a protective magic in time and build a barrier that held the fatal blow. The blow was so powerful that Minato barely managed to stay on his feet, and his barrier was cracking as it withstood the force of the attack. The machine evaluated that this had no effect and sent a request to exceed the limit, which was immediately accepted. It reported that the first level of the mana limiter had been removed. The guy noticed that the car was not yet ready to fight seriously and was surprised that he would have to fight with such an opponent. He immediately cast various magics: water cannon, fire volley, thunder cannon, and wind attack. He unleashed all these attacks on the machine before it launched another attack and kept a close eye on whether his spells could overwhelm the steel opponent. Soon, smoke enveloped the battlefield. As the smoke cleared, it was clear that the combined attacks had failed against the machine, which was about to step up another attack. Minato guessed that his magic was too weak to deal damage. The machine loudly announced the activation of a new attack and brought down a series of crushing blows on the guy. Minato tried to defend himself by strengthening the barrier, but at the same time, he couldn't figure out how to disable the enemy. He thought of his supreme nameless spell and guessed that it might be able to hit this dog bowl machine, but he doubted if it would give him time to prepare such a powerful ability. The machine had removed its limiter, and Minato reasoned that if it could hold on long enough, the mechanism would overheat and self-destruct. But there was another possibility that he would die sooner. If the magic was of little use, he took the next option and grabbed the pickaxe, still doubting its effectiveness against the huge mechanical pile. But he decided to take a chance and try this option, because there were no other ways to win. He slammed the pickaxe into the metal body with all his strength, but the powerful recoil caused the weapon to slip from his trembling hands, and Minato was already preparing to meet his tragic demise. At that moment, the machine activated a new strike. She aimed it directly at the flying pickaxe, and finally broke the sharp prong of its blade, slicing the weapon through the air. Minato noticed that the machine was attacking the discarded pickaxe, not him, and wondered if there was something strange about the original trajectory of its fall. He saw that there were heavy magic crystals in the exact spot where the pickaxe should have fallen. Minato assumed that their presence had a special meaning, but decided not to delve into the matter just yet. These crystals were a rare, explosive type of magic stone that was under the guild's control. They released a monstrous amount of mana with every hit, and in the old world they were used for military purposes. The fact that the machine had protected them meant that the explosion could cause damage to it. Realizing this, Minato opened the magic circle on his hand, and realized with a grin that he had managed to find a way to win in such a desperate situation. He sent a flaming attack towards the heavy magic crystals, which was immediately noticed by the machine and repelled the attack. Minato was surprised that it finally moved away from the egg. With his other hand, he activated a glowing magic circle in the direction of the egg and, with a hint of light mocking teasing in his voice, asked the machine if it was really sure of its current and vulnerable location. He remembered an old adage from his previous life: if you chase two hares, you won't catch one, and smiled maliciously at the car, asking what exactly it was going to protect first in case of danger. If the machine tries to protect two different things at the same time, it will fail. The machine immediately went back to protecting the egg, which made him smile. Instead of directly attacking the egg, he chose to focus on destroying the magic crystals, dangerous and unstable, which could detonate even at the slightest touch, turning the entire room into a blazing hotbed of destruction. The machine could not even predict that the guy would dare to shoot, being within a deadly radius of destruction. The attack instantly reached the crystals, which immediately caused a crushing explosion, and Minato was forced to rush for cover. He immediately used magic and noted that during the long preparation for this dangerous battle, the spell that he had spent the most energy on was the defensive one. It should have been able to withstand the destruction of even ancient ruins. After all, if we assume that this room really was part of an ancient ruin, then the walls must have been incredibly strong and stable. Hiding in a protective barrier, he pressed himself against a broad pillar and pulled up his hood, waiting for the explosion to end. The explosion was deafening, echoing off the stone walls, and then the room was enveloped in smoke and flames. The walls and pillars were cracked, and the entire hall was darkened by the acrid fire and the smell of hot stone. But the machine, having sacrificed its life, still managed to protect the egg, keeping it intact. However, her self-sacrifice only gave Minato the opportunity to finally get close to the goal and destroy the egg of doom completely. Using his magic, he shattered the egg with a crisp crack, which cracked in seconds and shattered like brittle glass into many small, glittering fragments. At the same time, a group of travelers were fighting monsters in a dense forest. But they soon noticed that the monsters were gradually disappearing, and this caused great confusion in the ranks of the heroes. There was immediate speculation among travelers that this was due to Minato's interference. More and more people were sure that he was involved in what was happening. Mina and Amy looked around in confusion, listening to the crowd. The girls looked at each other in amazement, not quite believing the words that were coming from all directions. Unable to withstand the rush of emotions, the girls with tears in their eyes joyfully rushed to each other and hugged tightly, as if they finally found the long-awaited confidence that he was really alive and could achieve a common goal. After a while, Minato slowly returned to the back gate of Mayasa City. The viewing platforms were already empty, and the bright flags no longer fluttered, making the place seem quiet. With a sigh, he felt the relief of being back in familiar places. But suddenly, a strange movement ahead of him caught his attention, making him wary. An entire army of warriors suddenly came out of the gate, led by an unknown guy. Minato noticed that the man looked like a guild employee and was accompanied by the elite knights of Cardiff. The warriors moved closer to the guy in a steady line, but he assumed that their goal was to investigate recent events. However, the stranger suddenly stopped right in front of him and asked if he was really Minato. Minato didn't even have time to answer before his hands were locked in heavy handcuffs. The stranger was about to ask the important question he had reserved for the dark-haired youth. But before continuing, he dismissed the knights, ordering them to return to the city, and he and Minato would go together. After that, the man clicked on one strange brick in the wall, which quietly went deeper. A hidden secret door opened in front of the youths. After taking a step inside, they found themselves in an underground prison, which, in addition to its main purpose, also served as a secret passage. A guild employee pushed open the massive cell door and asked Minato to come in and wait there for a while, promising to explain everything later. Once inside the cramped room, Minato sat down at a rough wooden table with a single candle flickering on it. He wondered why he had been arrested so suddenly, and what lay ahead. He pulled on the handcuffs, testing their strength and making sure that he couldn't remove them by force. Having locked up the young man, the guards did not use excessive measures and treated him gently enough. Minato concluded that obeying the guild's orders would be safer than resisting, although he recognized the risk of rashness in doing so. The young man felt as if he had already seen the guy who put the shackles on him, but the boy's face was hard to remember, but Minato was sure he'd seen it before. Muffled voices came from the dark corridor, discussing the unsuccessful search for someone's tracks, and it was clear that increased caution and extreme vigilance were needed. But Minato was in his own thoughts about the guild employee because his memory of him is started by the strong impression of one of his companions. Remembering the identities of the strangers, the door to the room finally opened after a while. He remembered exactly the people who had entered his room. It was Commander Cardiff and her assistant, who had been behind the girl at the inn earlier. Minato wondered why Cardiff had decided to arrest him. The girl expressed her joy at seeing the guy alive and well. Cardiff entered without another word and walked over to the table where Minato was sitting in shackles. Pushing back her chair, she sat down across from him, crossing her legs, a quiet smile on her lips. Cardiff only bowed her head slightly, leaned her chin on her palm, and continued to smile enigmatically. Minato started the conversation first, asking her to explain the reason for her arrest. Cardiff just licked her lips in satisfaction and watched the boy in silence. The girl slowly broke the silence, telling Minato that the reason for his arrest was because he was suspected of trying to tunnel into Maya's to let in hordes of monsters. Minato only sighed in surprise, because they made a tunnel leading to the Red Egg of Doom, but without considering the backstory, it looked like the tunnel was created to move monsters from underground directly into the city, and agreed with the suspiciousness of the situation. He was about to deny his suspicions when Cardiff spoke up, saying that she had already spoken to the lore seekers and his teammates. According to the girls, the three of them were engaged in excavation of the tunnel. However, Minato guessed that the girls were not able to clearly convey the situation to the commander. It only made things more difficult for him. Cardiff began parodying their voices, recounting their words about the destruction of the egg and the subsequent collapse. Her imitation conveyed Amy's character surprisingly accurately: clear voice, lightness, and excessive activity. She kept replaying her speech, including words about the disappearance of monsters and Minato's successful work. Minato noted Cardiff's skill, and she admitted that it was her special skill. With a sharp slap of her hand on the table, she regained her normal voice, approached the young man, and asked with cold interest how he had defeated the mob of monsters. Her eyes darkened, and her smile took on a sinister edge. She slowly asked the young man if he should believe in the fairy tale of a magician who single-handedly rushed into a crowded horde of enemies. Minato struggled to explain, as if the egg had already been destroyed by the time he arrived. In his heart of hearts, he decided to play the simpleton, so as not to attract even more suspicion. But Cardiff's distrust only deepened. She continued to glare at him, and he couldn't stand the weight of it, so he turned away. In his mind's eye, he admitted that playing the fool would prove extremely difficult. With a sigh, he opened the magic vault where the stone came from, and wasn't sure if it could act as proof. This round gem was lying in the room where he destroyed the egg. After the egg was destroyed, Minato was slightly upset, admitting that he would have liked to take one piece of the broken shell with him, but he couldn't find the remains anywhere. But something glittered among the piles of rocks and mechanical debris that caught the boy's attention. After digging it out, he picked up a glittering stone that was exactly the same color as the egg. A guild employee came over and gently took the stone from Minato with a towel. After checking through a special device, he confirmed that it was a real crystal of doom. Minato asked the girl if they were already familiar with this subject. Cardiff replied that such jewels appear when the red egg of doom is destroyed. When he heard the answer, he fished out the perfect proof for himself. But the commander noticed a different color of the stone. It wasn't red, but blue. She asked him how it had happened, and he stiffened and said he didn't know. He wanted to mention the color of the egg, but decided against it. Cardiff glanced at the assistant, who nodded in agreement. Cardiff set the crystal down on a clean table and gave it a little spin, saying that doom crystals are high-quality magical catalysts, but that their power can also tell you a lot about what's inside them. These stones were considered to be the origin of monsters, and there was a possibility that they were created artificially, which caused considerable concern among those present. Cardiff picked up the crystal, looked at it carefully, and asked Minato if she could take it for further analysis. Minato decided not to resist the commander's wishes, and explained that he had brought it with him so that they could jointly find out the source of the monster outbreak. Hearing his answer, Cardiff's eyes widened and a satisfied grin appeared on her face, as if confirming her guess. She suddenly burst out laughing, which completely embarrassed the guy. The commander told the assistant that her prediction was correct. Minato was not connected to an unknown group of people, and her instincts were right again. Minato cautiously asked what she meant, and Cardiff went on to say that their enemies would never willingly give up the Doom Crystal for analysis. With her hand on the hilt of her sword, she continued to smile. Taking Minato's hand, she forced him to stand up. The young man himself realized that Cardiff's suspicions were not caused by the creation of the tunnel and not the destruction of the red egg with them, but with a completely incomprehensible group of people. With a single swing of her sword, she managed to split the metal shackles, freeing the boy's hands. Cardiff returned the sword to its scabbard and apologized for putting him through such an unpleasant situation. The arrest was due to concern for his safety. If he openly carried the stone, then unknown people in the city would certainly try to rob him. Minato was surprised that this unknown group was so dangerous. Suddenly, Cardiff hugged him tightly, thanked him on behalf of the guild for saving him, and asked if he wanted to know more about those people. Freeing himself from her tight embrace, the guy replied that he wanted to know the reason for their pursuit. Then Cardiff shifted the explanation to her assistant, causing his indignation. After that, the girl said a carefree goodbye and opened the door, leaving the room, and the assistant tried in vain to stop her. The guild employee only sighed wearily. Minato, stretching his arms, realized that the guilt of destroying the egg was obvious and decided to take the shackles with him. The blonde youth turned to him in dismay. Minato noted that the one Cardiff called the leader did not believe in his innocence. He then briefly asked the dark-haired man if he had ever heard of the invisible hand of the machine. The leader waited in silence for an explanation, and Minato assumed that it was a ghost and one of its varieties. But the guess turned out to be wrong, and the leader only sighed wearily, realizing that the guy did not understand the essence of the question at all. The leader glanced at Minato, confirming that he really wasn't an ally of this group. Pushing back his chair, he breathed a sigh of relief and was glad that he hadn't died, which the dark-haired man didn't understand. After sitting down at the table, the leader explained that if Minato was an ally of this group, then they would have to fight, admitting that the victory would definitely not be for the blonde. He saw Minato as a dark and cold-blooded magician. At these thoughts, the leader began to tremble involuntarily, expressing his desire to finally get out of this place. But such a grim performance didn't surprise Minato at all. He was just an ordinary guy who wandered around with a pickaxe in his arms. The leader began to explain that the invisible hand of the machine is the name of a criminal organization whose actions the guild recognized as one of the most dangerous at the moment. And now they believed that the members of this organization were hiding in the territory of Mayas. Minato immediately recalled his instincts, which hadn't left him for a long time. He added that from the moment he arrived in Mayas, he felt someone's eyes on his back. Minato was right, because the leader was watching him. The blonde admitted that he had been following Minato since his arrival because of his suspicions about his possible membership in a dangerous organization. Minato was even outraged that the leader had initially suspected him. The young man, pursing his lips in displeasure, noticed that this attitude made him look like a criminal. Sighing, he admitted that it hurt him and asked for a clear explanation from the leader. The leader pulled a small piece of paper from his belt, handed it to Minato, and asked him to look at the contents. The dark-haired wizard opened the paper. There was a magic circle inscribed on this sheet that supplied water. Minato thought about the similarity of the drawing. Its structure was more like the magic circles of the old world than the ones here. He was sure that this circle was created by artificial intelligence and not by human hands. The leader asked how the boy knew that this circle was intended for water supply, to which Minato replied that he understood it from the patterns. That was why the blond man suspected the mage of being a member of such a dangerous organization, since almost no one else was able to read the circles used by the organization, and they were usually unreadable. As it turned out, this organization used similar unknown magic, whereas Minato was an ordinary stranger who possessed the 5 elements and used ancient magic. Now he understood the leader's suspicions. The leader explained that the invisible hand of the machine, magic circle, had flooded an entire city. 2,000 people died, and this is an unforgivable crime, unthinkable when using ordinary magic techniques. The leader slammed his fist down on the weapon description sheet. He angrily stated that there were many such cases, and the number of victims had long exceeded 10,000, threatening to reach even higher numbers. Minato, noticing how angry his companion was, noted that such actions were beyond the scope of a criminal group. He suggested that the organization may have been responsible for the outbreaks of monsters that attacked the cities. Folding the paper, the leader replied curtly that they had predicted so. The organization was targeting their city, and they couldn't let them go unpunished any longer. He asked Minato for help with something. The leader wanted to explain, but Minato spoke first. He warned that if it was a request to go to a deadly place, he would refuse. The leader froze, assuring that he wasn't going to ask for such a thing. He said he would like Minato to tell them any information that might be related to the perpetrators. Minato was surprised by such a simple request. The leader, in turn, hastened to assure him that they would pay well for the information provided. But Minato wondered why exactly he was asked, assuming that he was still seen as a questionable person. The dark-haired man was indignant, because if they really needed such powers, then he was interested in their reason for contacting him. To an outsider, the leader only tried to convince him, assuring that his abilities belonged to the highest class of magic. Minato then asked directly if the leader thought that there might be people from the organization hiding in the guild itself. This question was unexpected and very startled the interlocutor. The leader acknowledged his guess. That is why they hid everything by arrest. They showed that they were accusing him of provoking monsters, covering up the fact of the existence of a criminal organization. But the guy quickly refused the offer, saying that he could not identify spies. The leader immediately tried to stop him, saying that the discussion of this matter should only be entrusted to Cardiff herself or the guild members who wear the stone, which the guy then showed Minato. Minato examined the stone, seeing nothing unusual about it, and he assumed that the members might have used it as a signal. Minato realized that the signals were transmitted by simple stones. No one will notice a lost rock when stealing a bag, but no one will take out an ordinary stone during a conversation. The leader was increasingly surprised by the young man's observation skills. He asked Minato what kind of education he received before joining the guild and becoming an adventurer. He assured the guy that he would stop following him and would like him to trust them. Minato thought about it and admitted to himself that if they only needed to provide information, there was no reason to refuse. In addition, he would like to learn more about the organization itself and its members. The dark-haired man agreed to help, saying that he would definitely give them the relevant information. The leader bowed his head and thanked Minato for his cooperation. Minato picked up his notebook and asked if he could remove the shackles already. He removed the shackles with flame magic from his notebook. The metal melted, but such a demonstration greatly frightened the leader. The boy confessed in a trembling but stern voice that it was precisely because of such scenes that Minato looked so suspicious, inspiring both admiration and apprehension. After leaving the room, the leader decided to personally show Minato the hidden exit from the underground passage. Leading him to a massive mechanical elevator, he deftly lifted the heavy iron door up and stepped inside. Once inside the cabin, protected only by rough iron bars, the leader noted that there were no signs of surveillance now. Then he pulled on a rusty lever, and a sharp tug made Minato flinch all over. The elevator began to climb slowly, accompanied by an unpleasant creak and shudder of metal, heading them straight for the only exit to the surface. Stopping at the right level, they carefully stepped out of the cab. The leader led the way, and Minato paused for a moment, glanced into the dark abyss of the shaft, where even the bottom could not be seen, and then returned. The leader warned him to be careful in the city. When they reached the massive door, the leader opened it and invited Minato inside. The door opened to reveal a lively guild hall, a tavern where adventurers sat at tables and slowly ate hot food, sipping the contents in their small cask glasses. Minato looked around the spacious room and was surprised at how lively the atmosphere was. Everyone seemed to be gathered here, eager to learn more about how the recent monster invasion had been handled. As Minato scanned the crowd, he suddenly noticed that the leader had skillfully disappeared among the people and had already disappeared from his sight, leaving the young man alone. The dark-haired man suggested that the guy could deliberately make his appearance less significant so as not to attract the attention of the enemy. The leader's face itself was hard to remember. Minato agreed with the guy's possible tactic and decided not to stand out from the crowd either, putting on a hood and letting go of the gaze. Suddenly, his name came out of the crowd as Amy and Mina were searching for him in the crowd. After noticing the girls, he decided to hide from them by hiding behind the big back of one of the adventurers, as it wasn't the best time to be noticed by his female companions. The guy kept his face down, trying not to attract attention. He knew that if the girls saw him, they would definitely shout his name too loudly, which would attract everyone around them. At first, he wasn't sure how they knew where he was, but then he remembered Amy's nose. Minato also wanted to meet them and talk to them because the girls were genuinely worried about him all this time. After walking a little further, he crouched down and hid behind a large barrel while the girls walked around the tavern still calling his name. He felt an agonizing sense of guilt for making them so anxious. At that moment, the leader suddenly appeared right above the barrel and calmly asked what was bothering Minato. The dark-haired wizard silently pointed out to the girls that he had to hide from them. After seeing the girls, the leader realized that the guy wanted to see the knowledge seekers without too much noise. He headed towards Mina and Amy, asking Minato to wait in his seat. Seeing the leader, the girls were indignant and began to demand the return of their comrade, deciding that the guild had unfairly arrested him. However, the leader did not lose his composure, listened carefully to their harsh speeches, and managed to calm down his anger, which gradually made them quiet down. The leader, returning to the hiding guy, tapped on the barrel, and the latter poked out his head, seeing the girls in front of him. When they finally managed to find Minato, the girls couldn't contain their emotions. Tears of joy filled their faces, and they were about to shout his name out loud. But they restrained themselves in time, hastily covering their mouths with their hands. Instead of greeting him, they slapped him on the torso in unison. Minato hadn't expected this, but he knew it was just an expression of their anger and anxiety. With a genuinely warm smile, he said that he was glad to see Mina and Amy unharmed. The girls were humming with their hands over their mouths, trying not to attract too much attention. Minato didn't understand the words, but he could sense how much they were worried. Soon, Mina, remembering something, leaned over and whispered important words right in his ear. After that, they left the guild and said their goodbyes. Minato gave them a small smile and waved, staying at the entrance next to the leader, who was silently watching the scene. The leader quietly asked if he was sure of his decision, since the girls had suggested that they leave Mayas and explore the ruins together. Minato just scratched his head in silence, not giving a direct answer. He admitted that once he really would have liked to explore the ruins with Amy and Mina, meeting new adventures along the way, but now he saw the situation very differently. But he was afraid that if he returned to their team, he would accidentally spill the beans about what had happened in the underground prison, and he didn't want to drag the girls into this dangerous business. The leader thanked Minato for staying in town to help them sort out the organization. After taking a few steps forward, Minato turned to the blonde man, but the leader was already heading back to the guild. He only asked the dark-haired man to come to the waiting room in 3 days, promising to share important knowledge that might be useful in the future. 3 days later, Minato came to the waiting room as requested by the leader. He stood in front of the administration desk and asked what the guild employee had prepared for him, which made him shaken with excitement, because it took a lot of effort to destroy the red egg of doom. The blonde, bespectacled girl in charge of the guild's reception area recognized the guy in front of her. She congratulated the mage on being awarded the D rank, noting that it was the fastest promotion in history. Minato, on the other hand, didn't respond to the guild's congratulations. The girl noticed that the guy was not particularly happy and assured that this was an incredible achievement. Minato hurried to tell her that he was really happy, but he didn't really understand the ranking system. The promotion to D rank usually took longer than the guy's time, and he guessed that the leader might have been behind it. The girl handed him a card with his new rank on it. In his mind, he noted that the guy was actually a good person, and considering that he had shown him the secret passage connecting the basement to the guild hall, it proved that he could be trusted. Smiling, it was enough for him to have a new rank that could be of more use to the guy than money. The girl leaned down and tried to lift the massive box on her own. After struggling to keep her balance, she dragged it to the table and breathed a sigh of relief, saying that it was a special reward sent from the top management. Seeing the seal box in front of him, he guessed that it might be his real reward. Minato dragged the heavy box to his room, where he carefully placed it on the round wooden table. Curious, he began to examine the box carefully. Before that, the girl explained to him that the box is equipped with a seal, which gives access to the contents only to its owner. Minato noted the strict controls and doubted that the contents could have kept the money as a reward. With interest, he decided to put his hand on the seal. After a touch, the seal began to dissolve, and the guy managed to open the lid of the box, from where something immediately sparkled. The box contained a huge amount of gold coins, which was difficult to count. After opening the magic vault, he decided to move the contents of the box there. He was interested in the full amount of the reward. Among the gold coins flying up, he suddenly noticed a letter. Abruptly, he reached out and grabbed it. The sender's name wasn't on the email, and Minato assumed it might have been a simple receipt. He unfolded it to read the contents. At first glance, the sheet appeared blank, but soon the letters began to appear there. It turned out to be a progress report on the investigation, thanking Minato for his cooperation and the news that the crystal was artificially created. This meant that the invisible hand of the machine was actually trying to destroy this region, causing an outbreak of monsters. The realization sent a chill down his spine. The report also mentioned his reward of 100 million sig that ended up in the box, and the return of the Doom Crystal to the guy. Intermediate rewards meant the possibility of getting even more rewards. But Minato was more surprised that the crystal itself was being returned to him. If the members of the organization found out that he had it, they might think that Minato had deliberately sabotaged their plans. However, after carefully examining the box, he didn't find any dangerous crystal inside. He found the false bottom in a box containing a crystal with an additional note. Minato was surprised that he was handed something that was so cleverly hidden. The note claimed that he could have secretly used the crystal or sold it by contacting the Ziesel company. Turning the paper over, he noticed a map on the back with the company's location marked. After carefully studying the map, he carefully left the box and letter in the room. As he was about to leave, Minato paused for a moment, determined to destroy the leaf itself so as not to leave any unnecessary traces. Taking the letter in his hand, he used the finger of his other hand to create a flame and set the sheet on fire, expertly disposing of the evidence. Instead of keeping the Crystal of Doom, Minato decided to sell it and went out into the busy city. Wearing a hood, he tried not to attract attention and moved in the direction of Zasiel's company. After walking a long way, he found himself at the back of a noisy crowd in a quiet alley where he could safely remove his hood. The guy went to the specified address with the idea that if the company is really engaged in the secret purchase and sale of dangerous crystals, then the store should be something impressive, intended for rich and famous enthusiasts. However, the reality surprised him, because the store turned out to be a small, inconspicuous counter, completely lost in the background of the tall, stately houses that lined up around it and emphasized its modesty. Peeking through the window, he noticed only one discreet counter inside. Inside, there was also a neat carpet spread out and a shelf of cans next to it. There was a door not far from him. Compared to the shop next to the guild, it only had 30% of their stock, and Minato admitted that this place looked like it was in danger of going bust at any second. He checked the map again to make sure he had arrived correctly. The door creaked open. The door of the small shop was opened by a short old man with braided beards and wearing the robes of a magician. He looked up at the incoming customer. Minato immediately realized that the old man needed to show the unremarkable stone as a signal. He examined the boy's stone and took his own from his pocket. Minato was now convinced that this was the shop listed on the back of the sheet, but he was still surprised by the small space. The old man, as if reading the guy's mind, told him that the store was deliberately built small, which surprised the guy. He introduced himself as Zezel, holding the signal stone in his hands.